The wind had claws that night. It didn't just blow across the Wyoming territory. It scraped, howled, and pulled at the world like it wanted to tear something loose from its foundations. Jonah Rai leaned into the gale, snow blinding his vision as he tracked the faint hoofprints barely visible in the gathering drifts. His Spencer repeating rifle, a rare relic from his days in the Union Army, was slung across his back, the metal so cold it would tear skin if touched with bare hands. The last member of the Blackwater gang was out there somewhere. $5,000 in stolen bank money and a $200 bounty on his head. Jonah had tracked the man for 3 weeks across the harshest terrain Wyoming had to offer, and he wasn't about to lose him to a February blizzard. "Come on, Webster," he muttered to his sturdy buckskin gelding. "Few more miles." The horse snorted, ice forming around its nostrils, but pushed forward as it had done through countless campaigns. Like Jonah, Webster was a war veteran, having survived Shiloh and a dozen smaller battles that history would forget, but the men who fought them never would. When the small cabin appeared through the curtain of white, Jonah drew up. It wasn't on any map he knew, just a crude structure of logs and hope slapped together at the edge of Markson territory. Light glowed weakly from a single window. The tracks he'd been following veered toward it. Jonah dismounted, his joints stiff from cold, and the old wound in his thigh that ached whenever snow was coming. He secured Webster in the meager shelter of pine trees and checked his Colt Navy revolver. The weapon had been with him since '64, when a Union captain had pressed it into his hand and told him to "kill some Rebs for me, son." He'd killed plenty since then, just not the ones the captain had hoped for. A gunshot cracked through the howling wind. Jonah dropped instinctively, the reflex of a scout who'd survived Cheyenne ambushes and Confederate snipers. The sound had come from inside the cabin. He moved forward in a crouch, the wind at his back now, pushing him toward whatever waited inside. Then he heard it, faint but unmistakable above the storm's wail. A baby's cry. Jonah reached the cabin door, listened for a moment, then kicked it open, Colt raised and ready. The scene that met him was lit by a single oil lamp throwing grotesque shadows across rough-hewn walls. Emmett Markson stood with a smoking pistol, his tall frame silhouetted against the firelight. On the dirt floor lay a young woman, blood seeping through her nightdress. In a crude wooden box nearby, a newborn wailed. "Rye?" Markson's surprise quickly hardened into something colder. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jonah kept his revolver steady, eyes darting between Markson, the bleeding woman, and the infant. "Following a bank robber," he said. "Found something worse instead." Markson holstered his weapon with deliberate slowness. His carefully trimmed beard and expensive coat stood out starkly against the squalid cabin interior. Cattle baron, land speculator, and the most powerful man in 3 counties, Emmett Markson was the reason half the territory's politicians kept their pockets lined and their consciences buried. "This doesn't concern you," Markson said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "This is private business." "Private business usually doesn't involve shooting women," Jonah replied, stepping further into the cabin, positioning himself between Markson and the injured woman. The rancher's eyes narrowed. "You worked for me once, Rye. Good scout, good soldier. Knew when to follow orders and when to look the other way." That was before Little Wolf's camp. A flash of anger crossed Markson's face. "That was military necessity, and you know it. Shooting unarmed women and children isn't war, it's murder." Jonah glanced at the young woman on the floor. She was barely breathing, her face ashen. "Just like this." The baby's cries grew stronger, more insistent. "She's my housekeeper," Markson said with forced casualness. "Got herself in trouble. I was generous enough to give her a place to birth the bastard. Then she tried to extort me." He shrugged. "A man protects his reputation." "By leaving a woman and infant to die in a blizzard?" Jonah kept his gun trained on Markson, but his mind was racing through calculations of survival. The woman needed immediate attention. The baby wouldn't last the night without care. Markson moved toward the door. "I'm riding out. I suggest you do the same. Forget what you saw here." He paused. "Your bank robber passed through hours ago, headed north. You might still catch him if you leave now." The choice crystallized in Jonah's mind. $5,000 and a bounty, or 2 lives that the world seemed determined to discard. Unbidden, another memory surfaced. A Cheyenne mother clutching her infant as Markson ordered the charge. The sickening thud as cavalry boots trampled over bodies deemed expendable in the name of progress and civilization. Jonah had ridden away that day, resignation letter written in his heart, if not yet on paper. He wouldn't ride away this time. "Get out," Jonah said quietly. "What?" "Get out before I put a bullet in you." Markson's hand twitched near his holster, but something in Jonah's eyes, the thousand-yard stare of a man who'd seen too much death to fear causing more, made him reconsider. "You're making a mistake, Rye. This territory belongs to me. There's nowhere you can go that I won't find you." "We'll see about that." When the door slammed behind Markson, Jonah holstered his weapon and knelt beside the young woman. She couldn't be more than 19, with dark hair and a face that might have been pretty before pain and fear had ravaged it. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes flickered open, unfocused with shock. "The baby," she whispered. "The baby's fine. You're both going to be fine." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. The bullet had caught her in the say, not immediately fatal, but in these conditions, without proper medical care. "Anna," she managed. "My name is Anna." "I'm Jonah. I'm going to help you, Anna." The baby's cries grew more urgent. Jonah moved to the crude box and looked down at a tiny red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. A girl, from what he could tell, wrapped in nothing but a thin blanket. "Jesus," he muttered, removing his coat despite the cabin's bitter cold. He wrapped the child, tucking her against his chest where his body heat could warm her. She quieted almost immediately, as if sensing safety for the first time in her brief life. Back at Anna's side, he assessed her wound more carefully. The bleeding had slowed, but infection would be the real killer. He needed to get her to a doctor, but the nearest town was Redemption, a good 15 miles through the blizzard. "Anna, I need to stop this bleeding, then get you and the little one somewhere safe. It's going to hurt." She nodded weakly. Jonah retrieved his saddlebag, pulling out a flask of whiskey and the field medical kit he'd carried since the war. As a scout, he'd learned to treat wounds that would have killed most men. "When did you have the baby?" he asked, trying to keep her conscious as he cleaned the wound. 2 days, she gasped as the whiskey hit torn flesh. "He said he'd bring a doctor. Came with a gun instead." Jonah worked silently, his hands steady despite the cold and the infant pressed against his chest. Once the wound was bandaged, he built up the fire and scanned the cabin for supplies. There wasn't much: some canned goods, half a loaf of bread, a can of condensed milk that might keep the infant alive for a day or two. Outside, the storm howled with renewed fury. Traveling tonight would kill them all. They'd have to wait until morning and hope Anna held on. He settled the baby in a nest of blankets near the fire, then returned to Anna. Her breathing was shallow, her forehead burning with fever. "My baby," she murmured. He wanted to kill her too. "She's safe," Jonah assured her. "What's her name?" Anna's eyes focused briefly. Didn't have time. He came so quickly after. "She needs a name," Jonah said, more to keep Anna talking than anything else. Names were important. Names meant you weren't just another unmarked grave on the frontier. "You choose," she whispered, her eyes drifting closed. Jonah looked at the infant, so small against the vastness of the storm and the wilderness beyond. By all rights, she shouldn't be alive. Neither mother nor child should have survived Markson's plans for them. "Hope," he said finally. "Her name is Hope." Dawn brought little relief. The storm had weakened but not broken, and Anna's condition had deteriorated through the night. Jonah had done what he could, changing bandages and coaxing water between her cracked lips, all while tending to Hope with hands more accustomed to tracking and killing than nurturing life. The baby was stronger than she had any right to be. She took the diluted condensed milk from a cloth Jonah had fashioned into a crude feeding device. Her tiny fists curled tight as if holding on to life itself. "You're a fighter," he told her during one late-night feeding. "Good. You'll need to be." As he cradled the infant, memories surfaced of another life. Before the war, before the blood and the bounties. A small farm in Ohio, a wife named Sarah, a son who never drew breath. Cholera had taken them both in '59, leaving Jonah with nothing but a uniform to fill and a war to fight. He'd never imagined holding a child again. Anna woke briefly at first light, her eyes clearer than they had been. "You're still here," she said. "Said I would be." Jonah helped her drink some water. "We need to get you to a doctor. Think you can handle a ride to town?" She nodded weakly, though they both knew it was optimism rather than reality. Why are you helping us? Jonah didn't answer immediately. How could he explain that in saving them, he was trying to save something in himself as well? That every child left to die in the snow was Little Wolf's camp all over again? Let's just say I've got a score to settle with Markson, he finally replied. Anna's eyes drifted to Hope, who slept peacefully beside her. He'll come after her. She's evidence. Let him try. Preparing for the journey was a grim business. Jonah fashioned a sling to carry Hope against his chest, where his coat could shield her from the cold. For Anna, the prospects were bleaker. Moving her would reopen the wound, but leaving her meant certain death. I won't make it, she said as he wrapped her in every available blanket. You will. Jonah's tone brooked no argument. Your daughter needs you. Something flickered in Anna's eyes, a mother's determination stronger than any physical pain. She nodded once. The journey to redemption was a nightmare etched in white. Jonah walked beside Webster, the horse carrying Anna's semi-conscious form, while Hope remained tucked against his chest. Every step was a battle against snow that reached past his knees, wind that cut like knives, and the growing certainty that Anna wouldn't survive to see the town. By the time the scattered buildings of redemption appeared through the thinning snowfall, the sun was already westering. Hope had been remarkably quiet throughout the ordeal, as if she somehow understood that crying would only drain what little strength they had left. Redemption had seen better days. Founded during a short-lived gold rush in '68, it had dwindled to a shadow of its former ambitions. Now it existed primarily to service Markson's vast ranching empire and the railroad junction he was lobbying to have built there. Jonah headed straight for the doctor's office, a small, clapboard building with a faded sign proclaiming J. Felder, M.D. He'd never met the man, but frontier doctors were a special breed, either skilled healers or dangerous quacks, with little middle ground. He pounded on the door with a snow-crusted fist. We're closed, came a voice from within. Got a woman with a gunshot wound and a newborn, Jonah shouted back. Open up or I'll break it down. The door swung open to reveal an older man with a wild shock of white hair and spectacles perched on a hawkish nose. Dr. Felder took in the scene with one comprehensive glance. The half-frozen bounty hunter, the infant tucked in his coat, the barely conscious woman on the horse. Bring her in, he said without further question, stepping aside. The doctor's office was blessedly warm, heated by a pot-bellied stove that dominated the small waiting area. Beyond was a surgery lit by oil lamps and equipped with instruments that looked well used but mercifully clean. Put her on the table, Felder directed as he rolled up his sleeves. Then take that infant by the stove while I work. Jonah did as instructed, gently untying the sling that held Hope. The baby stirred, making small mewling sounds of protest at being moved from her warm nest. Gunshot to the left side, Jonah explained. About 36 hours ago. I cleaned and bandaged it, but infection set in. Felder gave him an appraising look. Military experience? Union scout. Picked up some field medicine. The doctor nodded and turned his attention to Anna. As he cut away the blood-soaked bandages, he asked, Want to tell me how a woman with a newborn ended up shot in the middle of nowhere? Jonah hesitated. In redemption, Markson's influence ran deep. The wrong word to the wrong ear could be fatal. Found them in an abandoned cabin during the storm, he said carefully. Whoever did it was long gone. Felder's skeptical expression made it clear he didn't believe the story, but he didn't press further. The wound's bad, bullets still in there. I'll need to operate immediately. He glanced at Hope. How's the little one? Stronger than she ought to be. There's condensed milk in that cupboard. Clara Reed dropped off a batch yesterday. She runs the general store. Make up a bottle while I work. For the next hour, Jonah paced the small waiting room, alternately feeding Hope and listening to the muffled sounds of Felder's surgery. The infant's gray eyes, alert in a way newborns shouldn't be, followed his movements as if memorizing the face of her unlikely protector. What am I doing with you, little one? He murmured. I'm not fit to care for a houseplant, let alone a child. Hope's only answer was to grasp his finger with surprising strength. When Felder finally emerged, his apron was stained with blood, but his expression was cautiously optimistic. Got the bullet out, cleaned the wound best I could. Now it's up to her strength and the Almighty, in whatever order you prefer. He washed his hands in a basin. She's young and otherwise healthy. That's in her favor. When will she be able to travel? Felder raised an eyebrow. Travel? She won't be going anywhere for weeks, if she survives at all. He dried his hands on a relatively clean towel. Now, you want to tell me the real story? Because that woman was shot at close range by someone she was facing. That's not a random attack. Before Jonah could answer, the surgery door opened, and Anna called weakly, "Jonah, the baby." He moved past Felder, Hope still cradled in his arms. Anna lay pale against the examination table, but her eyes were clear. "She's right here," Jonah said, lowering Hope so Anna could see her daughter, safe and sound. Tears slipped from the corners of Anna's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You need to rest now. We'll talk when you're stronger." As he turned to leave, Anna grabbed his sleeve with surprising strength. "Don't let him find her. Promise me." Jonah met her gaze steadily. "I promise." Back in the waiting room, Felder was watching him with shrewd eyes. "That's Emmett Markson's housekeeper," he said with what preamble. "Anna Monroe. She disappeared from his ranch about 3 weeks ago. Rumor said she was in the family way." Jonah tensed. "You know Markson?" "Everyone knows Markson." Felder's voice carried the bitterness of long-standing resentment. "I've patched up enough of his accidents over the years." "Then you know what he's capable of." Felder nodded grimly. "Question is, what are you planning to do about it? Markson owns this town, the mayor, most of the businesses, even the sheriff takes his orders. Not my problem. I'm just making sure these two are safe. Then I'm gone." The doctor looked pointedly at Hope, still nestled against Jonah's chest. "Doesn't look like gone to me." Before Jonah could respond, the office door banged open, letting in a blast of cold air and the imposing figure of Emmett Markson. Behind him stood 2 men, one wearing a sheriff's badge, the other clearly a hired gun by the way he positioned himself. "Dr. Felder," Markson said pleasantly, removing his hat. "I heard you had some interesting patients today." Jonah shifted, angling his body to shield Hope from view. His right hand drifted toward his holster, but with the infant in his arms, he was at a distinct disadvantage. Markson's eyes locked on Jonah, then dropped to the bundle against his chest. His smile never faltered. "Jonah Rye, small world. I see you've been playing nursemaid." He stepped further into the room. "I've been worried sick about poor Anna. When she disappeared from my employ, I feared the worst." "Funny way of showing concern," Jonah replied, "with a bullet." The sheriff, a weaselly man named Harris, stiffened. "That's a serious accusation, stranger." Markson waved a dismissive hand. "Mr. Rye has always had an active imagination. Now I'm here to take Anna and her child back to the ranch where they belong. My staff will care for them properly." "The woman has a bullet wound," Felder interjected. "She can't be moved." "Then I'll take the child for now." Markson extended his hands. "Come now, Rye, that's no job for a bounty hunter." The hired gun shifted, making his intention clear. One move from Jonah, and bullets would fly. Jonah felt the weight of the infant against his chest, heard Anna's plea echoing in his mind. "Don't let him find her. Promise me." "The child stays with her mother," he said. Markson's facade of congeniality cracked slightly. "That's not your decision to make." "Maybe not," came a new voice from the doorway, "but it is mine." Sheriff Dunn stood framed in the entrance, his weathered face set in lines of grim determination. Unlike Harris, who wore his badge like a costume, Dunn carried the authority of a man who'd earned his position through something other than political connections. "Sheriff Dunn," Markson acknowledged coldly, "I thought you were still recovering from that unfortunate accident." Reports of my incapacitation were exaggerated. Dunn stepped into the room, his limp barely noticeable. "Harris, what are you doing in my jurisdiction?" The deputy sheriff shuffled uncomfortably. "Just accompanying Mr. Markson on his personal business, sir." "Your personal business crossed county lines when you entered Redemption," Dunn told Markson. "And assaulting a woman and child is my business." "I haven't assaulted anyone," Markson protested. "I'm simply retrieving my housekeeper and her child." Dunn's gaze flicked to Hope, then back to Markson. "Funny, I don't recall you mentioning any child when you reported her missing last month." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "I think you'd better leave, Mr. Markson. The woman will stay here until she's fit to make her own decisions." For a moment, tension crackled in the room like static before a lightning strike. Jonah saw the calculation in Markson's eyes. weighing violence against the public scene it would create. Finally, Markson replaced his hat with deliberate slowness. "This isn't over," he said, looking directly at Jonah. "Not by a long shot." His gaze dropped to Hope. "That child has a rightful place in this world, and it isn't with a killer for hire." After they'd gone, Dunn turned to Jonah. "You've stepped in it deep this time, Rye. You know me? I make it my business to know every gun hand and bounty hunter that passes through." Dunn's expression softened slightly as he looked at Hope. "Though I admit, this is a new look for you." Felder cleared his throat. "The woman needs rest, and this little one needs proper care. There are matters you men should discuss elsewhere." Dunn nodded. "My office. 1 hour." He fixed Jonah with a stern look. "And bring the full story, not the version you're planning to tell me, but what actually happened." After the sheriff left, Jonah stood in uncertain silence. He'd never planned on staying in redemption, never planned on being responsible for a woman and child. Yet here he was, holding a newborn with a price on her head as surely as any outlaw he had ever tracked. "You can leave her with me while you talk to Dunn," Felder offered, nodding at Hope. Jonah hesitated, surprised by his own reluctance to let the child go. "I've delivered more babies than you've shot men," the doctor added dryly. "She'll be safe." "It's not her safety I'm worried about," Jonah replied, gently transferring Hope to the doctor's waiting arms. "It's what happens when Markson comes back with more men and fewer witnesses." Felder cradled the infant with practiced ease. "Markson's powerful, but even he has to tread carefully with Sheriff Dunn. There's history there." "What kind of history?" "The kind that keeps a man looking over his shoulder." Felder's expression darkened. "Dunn's the only reason this town isn't completely under Markson's thumb. Don't underestimate either of them." Jonah glanced toward the surgery where Anna lay recovering. "Will you warn me if she wakes? I promised her that you'd protect her child." "I heard." Felder's shrewd eyes assessed him. "Surprising promise from a man who tracks killers for money. Maybe I'm tired of the killing business." "Let's hope so, because protecting that child from Emmett Markson will take more than a fast gun and a scout's tracking skills. It'll take something you might have forgotten you ever had." "And what's that?" "A heart, Mr. Rye." Felder nodded toward the door. "Now go see Dunn before he comes looking for you. I suspect time is something none of you have in abundance anymore." As Jonah stepped into the snow-covered street, the weight of the promise he'd made settled around his shoulders like a physical burden. He'd faced Comanches, Confederate sharpshooters, and blizzards that froze men where they stood, but nothing had prepared him for the responsibility of a life so small, so defenseless, yet somehow already entwined with his own. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The answer came not in words but in memory. Hope's tiny fist gripping his finger, Anna's desperate plea, and the knowledge that some debts can only be paid by protecting what others would destroy. With one last look at the doctor's office, Jonah turned toward the sheriff's building, each step carrying him further from the life he'd known and deeper into a war he'd never planned to fight. Sheriff Thomas Dunn's office occupied the first floor of Redemption's modest jailhouse, a brick building that had once housed a mining company before the gold played out. Unlike the opulent county courthouse that Markson had funded, Dunn's domain was utilitarian and battle-scarred, much like the man himself. Jonah stamped snow from his boots before entering. The office was warm, heated by a pot-bellied stove in the corner. Maps of the territory covered one wall, while the other held a gun rack and a collection of wanted posters, including, Jonah noted with grim amusement, one bearing his own likeness from 2 years back. Dunn sat behind a desk cluttered with paperwork, his weathered face impassive as Jonah entered. At 55, the sheriff was old for his profession in a land where men often died young and violently. The gray at his temples and the deep lines around his eyes spoke of hard experience rather than just years. "Sit," Dunn said, gesturing to a chair opposite his desk. Jonah remained standing. "I prefer to keep my options open." "Suit yourself." Dunn leaned back, studying him. "So, Jonah Rye, last I heard you were tracking the Blackwater gang after that bank job in Cheyenne. Got 4 of the 5. 5th led me to that cabin in the storm. And instead of your bounty, you found a shot-up woman and a newborn." Dunn's gaze was penetrating. Must have been quite the disappointment. I've learned to live with disappointment. Have you now? Dunn opened a drawer, withdrew a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured measures into both, sliding one across the desk. Tell me what happened out there. The real story. Jonah hesitated, weighing his options. In his experience, lawmen were either in someone's pocket or fighting a losing battle against those who were. Yet something in Dunn's demeanor suggested he might be one of the rare exceptions. I tracked the last Blackwater man to that cabin, Jonah began, accepting the whiskey but not drinking. Found Marks in there instead. He'd shot the woman, Anna, and was planning to leave her and the baby to die in the storm. And you stopped him. I did. Why? Dunn's question cut straight to the heart of the matter. You're a bounty hunter, not a knight in shining armor. $5,000 walked away while you played nursemaid. The whiskey burned Jonah's throat as he finally took a swallow. Maybe I'm tired of watching men like Markson decide who lives and who dies. Dunn nodded as if Jonah had confirmed something he already suspected. Markson's claiming the child is his. Says Anna was trying to extort him with false claims of paternity. He admitted it was his in that cabin, Jonah countered, right before he tried to erase the evidence. Your word against his. Dunn refilled both glasses. In case you haven't noticed, Emmett Markson owns most of this county. The mayor, Judge Harrow, half the businesses, they all depend on his goodwill. Your testimony won't count for much. Then why are you bothering to hear it? A ghost of a smile crossed Dunn's face. Because I've been waiting 15 years for Markson to make a mistake big enough to bring him down. This might be it. What's your stake in this? Dunn's expression hardened. That's my business. Point is, I can protect that woman and child for now. But Markson won't stop. He'll find legal means to claim the baby, or he'll have Anna declared unfit, or he'll simply make both of you disappear. I've disappeared before, Jonah said. I'm good at it. Not with an infant and a wounded woman. You're not. Dunn stood, moving to the map on the wall. Markson's already sent telegrams to Denver. By tomorrow, he'll have court orders and perhaps federal marshals backing his claim. So what do you suggest? Stay in town for now. I've got some influence left, enough to delay any legal proceedings. Dr. Felder will keep Anna hidden at his place. As for you and the baby, he trailed off, considering. I'm not exactly equipped for child rearing, Jonah pointed out. No, you're not. Dunn seemed to reach a decision. There's a widow named Clara Reed who runs the general store. Her husband died in a mining accident 3 years back, though anyone with eyes could see he'd been beaten to death. She's no friend of Markson's, and she's got a room to spare on the edge of town. You're suggesting I hide out with baby at some widow's house? That's your plan? Part of it. Dunn returned to his desk. The rest depends on what Anna says when she's strong enough to talk. If we can prove Markson shot her, we might have a case. Might. And if we can't, Dunn's expression was grim, then you'd better decide how far you're willing to go to keep that promise you made. The tension in the room was broken by a sharp knock. The door opened to reveal a young man, barely out of his teens, wearing the nervous expression of someone delivering unwelcome news. Sheriff, he said, Mayor Caldwell's asking for you. Says it's urgent. Dunn sighed. Tell him I'll be along shortly, Tim. He said immediately, sir. He's at the courthouse with Mr. Markson and Judge Harrow. The implications were clear. Markson was moving faster than anticipated. I'll be right there. Dunn waited until the young deputy had gone before turning back to Jonah. You've got maybe an hour before this gets official. Go to Clara Reed's store on Pine Street. Tell her I sent you and that it's about Markson. She'll understand. And then what? Then you pray that Anna recovers enough to testify before Markson finds a way to silence her permanently. Dunn checked his revolver before strapping it on. One more thing, Rye. Why did you really help them? A man with your reputation doesn't risk his neck for strangers without reason. Jonah thought of Little Wolf's camp, the smell of gunpowder and blood, the screams that had followed him across a decade of restless nights. He thought of Markson standing over bodies he'd classified as military necessity. Let's just say I've got a debt that needs settling. Dunn studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Fair enough. But remember, this isn't just about your revenge. There are 2 innocent lives depending on your decisions now. I'm aware of the stakes. Good. Dunn adjusted his hat, because they just got higher. Clara Reed's general store occupied a modest clapboard building at the quieter end of Redemption's main street. A bell jangled as Jonah entered, Hope securely bundled against his chest beneath his coat. The store was well stocked but not prosperous, evidence of a business surviving rather than thriving in Markson's shadow. Clara herself stood behind the counter, a woman of perhaps 40 with prematurely gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that had seen too much of life's harder aspects. She regarded Jonah with open suspicion. "Help you with something?" she asked, her gaze lingering on the suspicious bulk beneath his coat. "Sheriff Dunn sent me," Jonah replied quietly. "Said to tell you it's about Markson." Her expression shifted subtly. Without a word, she moved to the front windows and pulled down the shades, then turned the sign to closed. Only then did she approach Jonah. "Show me," she said. Jonah carefully opened his coat, revealing Hope's sleeping face. Clara's breath caught. "Merciful God," she whispered. "Is that Anna Monroe's daughter?" "Yes." The rumors were true then. She reached out hesitantly, then drew back her hand. "And Markson?" "Tried to kill them both. Almost succeeded with Anna." Clara's face hardened with an anger so deep it seemed carved into her bones. "Follow me," she said, leading the way to a door at the back of the store. Beyond lay a modest living area, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a small sitting room with well-worn furniture, and stairs leading to what Jonah presumed were bedrooms. The home of a woman living alone, but ready to accommodate others if needed. "Let me see her properly," Clara said once they were safely inside. Jonah unwrapped Hope, who stirred at the change in temperature but didn't cry. Clara's experienced hands gently examined the infant. "She's stronger than she should be for a newborn," Clara noted. "Good color, good reflexes. You've been feeding her?" "Condensed milk, doctor. Felder showed me how to dilute it." Clara nodded approvingly. "You've done well, considering. But she'll need proper care now. Routine, warmth." She glanced up at Jonah, taking in his trail-worn appearance and the weapons he carried. "No offense, but you don't exactly look the nursemaid type." "None taken, I'm not." "Then why are you involved in this?" Jonah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I was tracking a man, found Markson instead, made a choice, which a dangerous choice." Clara took Hope from him, cradling the infant with practiced ease. "Markson doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. He'll come for this child. Let him try." Clara's expression softened slightly. "Brave words, but this isn't a gunfight you can win with that fancy rifle. Markson fights with lawyers and politicians and money." She nodded toward a chair. "Sit. You look dead on your feet, and we need to talk." Jonah sank into the offered seat, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion that had been building since he'd found Anna and Hope. The warmth of the kitchen, the relative safety, it all conspired to remind his body of how long he'd gone without proper rest. "I lost a husband to Markson," Clara said as she prepared a fresh bottle for Hope. "James owned a small silver claim up in the hills. Nothing major, but enough to give us a decent living. Then Markson discovered the creek running through that claim was perfect for watering his northern pastures. He wanted the land. He always wants the land." Clara's voice was matter-of-fact, the bitterness long since crystallized into something harder. "James refused to sell. 3 months later, they found him at the bottom of his own mine shaft with his skull caved in. Accident, they called it." "I'm sorry." "Save your sympathy. I don't need it." She tested the temperature of the milk on her wrist before feeding Hope. "What I need is to know if you're serious about protecting this child. Because if you're not, if you're planning to run once things get difficult, tell me now." Jonah watched as Hope accepted the bottle eagerly. "I made a promise." "Men make promises all the time. They're less reliable about keeping them." "I keep mine." Clara studied him for a long moment. "We'll see. For now, you can stay in the spare room upstairs. It's small, but it's private, and there's a back staircase that leads to the alley if you need to leave in a hurry." "You seem prepared for trouble. In this town, with Markson around, trouble's the only thing you can count on." She adjusted Hope in her arms. "There's a cradle in the attic. It was meant for—" She stopped, something vulnerable flickering across her face before disappearing behind practiced stoicism. "It'll serve for now." Jonah understood what she hadn't said. A cradle for children who never came, or perhaps for one lost. Another life Markson had damaged, directly or indirectly. "Thank you," he said simply. Clara nodded. "Get some rest. You look like death warmed over, and no use to anyone in that state. I'll watch the little one." Jonah hesitated, surprised by his reluctance to let Hope out of his sight, even with someone clearly more qualified to care for her. Clara seemed to read his thoughts. "She'll be right here when you wake up, I promise." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "And unlike some, I always keep my promises." The spare room was indeed small, just enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair beneath a window that overlooked the alley behind the store. Jonah checked the window first, confirming it opened easily and the drop to the ground was manageable. Old habits died hard. He removed his gun belt and boots, but kept his clothing on, ready to move at a moment's notice. The Spencer rifle he leaned against the wall, within easy reach. Only then did he stretch out on the bed, his body immediately protesting years of hard living and recent abuse. Sleep claimed him almost instantly, but it wasn't restful. Dreams came in fragmented bursts, Anna bleeding in the snow, Hope's tiny face blue with cold, Markson standing over them both with a smoking pistol, and behind it all, the ghosts of Little Wolf's camp. Women and children cut down while Jonah watched, paralyzed by duty and orders he should have questioned sooner. He woke with a start hours later, his hand already on his revolver before consciousness fully returned. The room was bathed in late afternoon light, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why. Then he heard it, a baby's cry, followed by Clara's gentle shushing. Hope, Anna, Markson, it all came flooding back. Jonah rose, splashed water on his face from the basin, and made his way downstairs. The store was open again, a few customers browsing the shelves under Clara's watchful eye. She nodded toward the back room, indicating he should wait there. In the kitchen, Jonah found Hope sleeping in a wooden cradle that had been placed near the stove for warmth. The sight of her, peaceful, safe for the moment, triggered an unfamiliar protective instinct that both comforted and unsettled him. "She's got good lungs," Clara said, entering from the store. "Fed her twice while you slept. She's doing well." "Any word from Dunn or Felder?" "Nothing yet." Clara busied herself at the stove. "There's talk in town, though. Markson's been at the courthouse all day with Judge Harrow. They've sent telegrams to the territorial capital." "Legal maneuvering?" "Most likely. Markson never does his own dirty work if he can help it." She placed a plate of stew in front of Jonah. "Eat, you'll need your strength." The food was simple but hearty, and Jonah realized he couldn't remember his last proper meal. As he ate, Clara filled him in on the town's complicated relationship with Emmett Markson. He came here after the war, when redemption was still booming from the gold strike, had money from somewhere, family back east, some said, or war profiteering, bought up land for pennies when the mines started failing. Now he controls everything from the foothills to the river junction. And no one stands against him? Some have tried, James, Sheriff Dunn, in his way. A few others. Clara's expression grew distant. They tend not to prosper. What's Dunn's stake in this? He seemed to have a personal grudge. Clara hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share. They served together in the war. Union cavalry. Dunn was Markson's commanding officer for a time. She lowered her voice, though there was no one to overhear. There was an incident near the end of the war. A civilian massacre that Markson ordered. Dunn tried to have him court-martialed, but Markson had powerful friends even then. "Little Wolf's camp," Jonah said quietly. Clara's eyes widened. "You know about that?" "I was there, as a scout." The stew suddenly tasted like ashes in his mouth. "I saw what Markson did." "Then you understand why Dunn wants him brought down." Clara glanced at Hope's sleeping form. "And why that child represents something more than just Markson's indiscretion. She's evidence of what he really is." The bell over the store's front door jangled, followed by hurried footsteps. Clara tensed, her hand moving beneath her apron, where Jonah suspected she kept a weapon. Dr. Felder appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Markson's obtained a court order. He's declared himself the father of Anna's child and is demanding custody." "On what grounds?" Jonah demanded, rising. "Legal technicality. Under territorial law, an unmarried woman has limited rights to her child if the father claims paternity and can provide for the infant. Felder removed his spectacles, cleaning them nervously. Judge Harrow has ordered that Hope be brought to the courthouse tomorrow morning for a formal hearing. And if we refuse, then you'll all be charged with kidnapping, and Dunn won't be able to protect you. Felder replaced his glasses. There's more. Markson's hired Pinkerton detectives, supposedly to investigate Anna's shooting. In reality, they're watching my office, waiting for a chance to take the child. How is Anna? Claire asked. Recovering, but slowly. The wound was bad and she lost a lot of blood. She's in no condition to appear in court. Felder turned to Jonah. Dunn's doing what he can to delay, but Markson's brought in a lawyer from Denver who knows every loophole in territorial law. So we run, Jonah said. Not an option, Felder replied. Markson's men are watching every road out of town. You wouldn't make it 5 miles. Clara had been silent, her gaze shifting between the men and the sleeping infant. There might be another way, she said slowly. A legal counterattack. Felder raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? If Anna were married, her husband would have stronger claim to the child than Markson, regardless of biological paternity. Jonah saw where she was heading. You're suggesting a marriage of convenience. I'm suggesting a legal shield, Clara corrected. Anna needs a husband on paper, someone who can stand against Markson in court. Felder looked skeptical. Who? No man in town would dare cross Markson that openly. I would, came a new voice from the doorway. Samuel Washington stood there, his powerful blacksmith's frame filling the entrance. At 40, the former slave carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had survived far worse than Emmett Markson's threats. Samuel, Clara acknowledged with obvious respect. How much did you hear? Enough. He stepped into the kitchen, nodding to Jonah. I don't know you, mister, but I've heard what you did for that woman and her child. That counts for something in my book. I appreciate the sentiment, Jonah replied, but this isn't your fight. Samuel's eyes hardened. Markson made it my fight 3 years ago when he tried to run me out of town for opening my smithy. Said no colored man should own property in redemption. He flexed his massive hands. I stayed. He backed down, at least publicly, but we both know it's not over. What Samuel means, Clara explained, is that he's one of the few men in redemption that Markson can't easily intimidate or buy off. I'm also a man of the church, Samuel added, licensed to perform marriages in emergencies when no preacher is available. Felder looked thoughtful. It could work. If Samuel married Anna, then legally— Hold on, Jonah interrupted. We're talking about arranging a marriage for a woman who hasn't even been consulted, a woman who's barely conscious. It wouldn't be a real marriage, Clara said, just a legal protection until Anna recovers enough to make her own decisions. And what about when Markson challenges it, claims it was done under duress? Let him, Samuel said with quiet confidence. I've got documentation of my license to perform marriages, and I'll gladly sign as Anna's husband if it protects her and that child from Markson. The cradle creaked as Hope stirred, making small mewling sounds that quickly transformed into hungry cries. Clara moved to pick her up, but Jonah was faster, lifting the infant with a gentleness that belied his rough exterior. There's another option, he said as he cradled Hope. I could marry her. The room fell silent except for Hope's cries. You're a bounty hunter, Felder said finally. No offense, but that's not exactly a stable profession for a family man. I'm also a witness to what Markson did, Jonah countered. I was there in that cabin. I heard him admit the child was his before he shot Anna. My testimony, combined with a legal claim as Hope's stepfather, might be enough to force a federal investigation rather than a local hearing. Samuel nodded slowly. He's got a point. A stranger passing through who suddenly marries Anna might raise suspicions, but it also complicates Markson's legal strategy. It's risky, Clara warned. Markson will dig into your past, find anything he can use against you. Let him. Jonah looked down at Hope, who had quieted somewhat in his arms. My past isn't pretty, but I've got nothing to hide. Felder removed his spectacles again, a habit when deep in thought. We'd need Anna's consent, even if just a nod or a whispered yes. Otherwise, it's not legal. Can you get me to her, past Markson's watchers? There's a service tunnel connecting my office to the old assayer's building next door. Relic from the mining days. Markson's men are watching the front and back, but they don't know about the tunnel. Felder replaced his glasses. It's a risk, though. If they catch you there, they won't. Jonah handed hope to Clara. When? Tonight, after dark. Come to the assayers building at 9. I'll meet you there. As Felder left to return to his office, Samuel lingered, studying Jonah with thoughtful eyes. You sure about this? He asked. Marrying a woman you barely know, taking on a child, all while facing down the most powerful man in the county? That's a lot for any man to handle. I'm sure about keeping my promise, Jonah replied. The rest is just details. Samuel seemed satisfied with that answer. I'll be ready when you need me then. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing. The blacksmith shop has a cellar. Stone walls, solid door. If things go bad and you need a place to make a stand, it's yours. After he'd gone, Clara fixed Jonah with a penetrating stare. You don't strike me as the marrying kind. I'm not. Jonah watched as she expertly prepared a bottle for Hope. But I've seen what happens when men like Markson are allowed to protect those weaker than themselves. I won't let that happen to Hope or her mother. Even if it costs you your freedom, maybe your life. Jonah thought of the years since the war, the endless tracking, the killing for money, the emptiness of a life without purpose beyond the next bounty. What had it gotten him except nightmares and a reputation as a man to be feared rather than respected? Maybe it's time I found something worth the pain, he said finally. Clara's expression softened. Well, you'd better get ready then. Looks like you're getting hitched tonight. The old assayer's office stood dark and abandoned, its windows boarded up since the gold rush ended. Jonah approached from the shadows, alert for any sign of Markson's watchers. The town was quiet, most respectable citizens home for the evening, while the saloons catered to those with different priorities. A soft whistle from the narrow alley beside the building signaled Felder's presence. The doctor emerged from the darkness, keys jingling softly in his hand. Any trouble? Jonah asked as they entered the musty interior. Not yet, but I don't like it. Markson's men have been too quiet. Felder lit a small lantern, revealing dust-covered counters and empty display cases. This way. The tunnel was narrow and low-ceilinged, forcing Jonah to crouch as they made their way beneath the street. It smelled of damp earth and forgotten ambitions, a physical remnant of redemption's brief golden age. Used to move gold from the assayers to my office safe, Felder explained as they walked. Safer than carrying it on the street, especially after paydays when liquor was flowing. Handy foresight. More like healthy paranoia. Comes with the territory out here. Felder's office was dimly lit, curtains drawn against prying eyes. The doctor led Jonah upstairs to a small room at the back of the building where Anna lay sleeping. Despite the circumstances, Felder had made the space as comfortable as possible. Clean sheets, a vase of dried wildflowers, even a small bookshelf. She's been in and out of consciousness, Felder said quietly. Fever's down, which is a good sign. The wound's clean, no sign of infection, but she's weak from blood loss. Jonah approached the bed slowly. Anna looked impossibly young and vulnerable in sleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her skin pale from trauma and blood loss. It was hard to reconcile this fragile figure with the mother who had fought so hard to protect her child. Should we wake her? Let's see if she rouses naturally first. Felder checked her pulse. Anna, can you hear me? You have a visitor. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment, her gaze was unfocused. Then it sharpened as she recognized Jonah. Hope? She whispered, her voice barely audible. She's safe, Jonah assured her. Clara Reed is watching her. Relief washed over Anna's features. Thank you, she managed, for keeping your promise. About that promise, Jonah glanced at Felder, who nodded encouragingly. Markson's making legal moves to take Hope. He's declared himself the father and is demanding custody. Fear replaced relief in Anna's eyes. No, she gasped, trying to sit up. He can't. Easy, Felder said, gently restraining her. You'll tear your stitches. There might be a way to stop him, Jonah continued, a legal maneuver of our own, but it would require something unusual. Anna's gaze moved between the two men. What? She asked warily. Marriage, Jonah said bluntly. If you were married, your husband would have stronger legal claim to Hope than Markson, regardless of who her biological father is. Confusion crossed Anna's face. But I'm not. Understanding dawned. You're suggesting It wouldn't be a real marriage, Jonah hastened to add, just a legal shield to protect you and Hope until you're strong enough to fight Markson properly. Or until we can get you both safely away from here, Felder added. Anna was silent for a long moment, her eyes never leaving Jonah's face. Why would you do this? She finally asked. You don't even know me. Jonah considered several answers, duty, justice, revenge against Markson, but settled on the simplest truth. Because you and Hope deserve a chance, and because I made you a promise. A marriage based on a promise, Anna mused, a hint of bitter humor in her weak voice. Still better than what Markson offered. We don't have much time, Felder interjected gently. The hearing is tomorrow morning. If we're going to do this, it needs to be tonight. Anna closed her eyes briefly as if gathering what little strength she had. When she opened them again, there was determination amid the pain and exhaustion. Yes, she said, I'll do it, for Hope. Felder nodded, relieved. I'll get Samuel. He can perform the ceremony and serve as witness. When the doctor had gone, Anna regarded Jonah with an intensity that belied her weakened state. If we do this, she said, you need to know what you're getting into. Markson won't stop. He'll come after all of us. I'm counting on it, Jonah replied. You want him to come after you? Why? Jonah thought of Little Wolf's camp, of the bodies in the snow, of Markson standing over Anna with a smoking gun. Let's just say Markson and I have unfinished business. This isn't just about Hope and me, is it? Anna's perception was uncomfortably acute. You're using us to get to him. No, Jonah said firmly. Protecting you and Hope comes first. But if bringing down Markson is part of that, I won't pretend to be sorry. Anna studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slightly. Fair enough, at least we're being honest about our motives. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Not exactly the wedding I dreamed of as a girl. Probably not the husband either. I don't know. Something in her expression softened. A man who risks everything to save a woman and child he doesn't know? Some might call that a fairy tale. Trust me, Jonah said grimly. I'm no Prince Charming. The door opened, admitting Felder and Samuel, who carried a worn Bible in his massive hands. The blacksmith's solemn expression matched the gravity of the occasion. Miss Anna, he greeted her with gentle dignity. Dr. Felder has explained the situation. Are you certain this is what you want? As certain as I can be about anything right now, Mr. Washington. Samuel nodded, opening the Bible. Then let us proceed. The circumstances are unusual, but the commitment is no less binding in the eyes of the law and God, for those who believe. The ceremony that followed was brief and stripped of traditional sentimentality. No flowers, no music, no vows of eternal love, just the necessary legal declarations and Samuel's deep voice pronouncing them man and wife. Felder signed as witness, and it was done. Jonah Rye, bounty hunter and former Army scout, was now the husband of Anna Monroe and legal stepfather to infant Hope. I'll file the marriage certificate first thing in the morning, Samuel said, carefully folding the document. Judge Harrow will have to acknowledge it before the hearing. Anna had grown paler during the brief ceremony, the effort of staying conscious clearly taking its toll. Felder checked her pulse with professional concern. She needs rest, he announced. The excitement has been too much. Jonah moved closer to the bed. I should go. Clara will be wondering. Anna's hand caught his, surprising him with its sudden strength. Hope, she whispered. Bring her to me before the hearing, please. I will, Jonah promised. Try to rest now. As he turned to leave, Anna added softly, Mr. Rye, thank you for the strangest wedding day a woman ever had. Despite everything, Jonah found himself smiling slightly. You're welcome, Mrs. Rye. The absurdity of it, thanking him for a sham marriage conducted in a sick room under threat of legal kidnapping, struck them both at the same moment. Anna's weak laugh mingled with Jonah's low chuckle, a brief moment of human connection amid the gathering storm. Then Felder was ushering him toward the tunnel, and the moment passed. Back in the cold reality of Redemption streets, Jonah felt the weight of what he'd done settling around his shoulders. He'd just painted a target on his back the size of Wyoming territory. As he moved through the shadows toward Clara's store, a prickling sensation at the base of his neck warned him he was being watched. Instinct made him duck into a narrow gap between buildings just as a figure emerged from the darkness ahead. One of Markson's Pinkertons, judging by the city clothes and watchful demeanor. The man paused, scanning the street with professional thoroughness, then moved on. Jonah waited, counting heartbeats, before continuing by a more circuitous route. When he finally reached Clara's back door, he found it locked, unusual for the hour. He knocked softly. Nothing. Alarm bells rang in his mind. Drawing his revolver, he tried the door again, finding it now yielded to his touch. It hadn't been locked. It had been blocked from within. The kitchen beyond was dark and silent. Too silent. "Clara," Jonah called softly, moving inside with practiced caution. A match flared, illuminating Emmett Markson seated at the kitchen table. Beside him stood Harris, the corrupt deputy sheriff, his gun trained on Clara, who stood rigidly by the stove. Of hope, there was no sign. "Good evening, Rye," Markson said pleasantly. "Or should I say, good evening, Mr. Monroe? My sources work quickly." His smile never reached his eyes. "You seem to have misplaced something that belongs to me." "Where is she?" Jonah kept his voice steady, despite the fury building inside him. His gun remained trained on Markson, though Harris's weapon pointed at Clara made the standoff precarious. Markson leaned back in the chair, the picture of a man completely at ease. "The child is safe. That's all you need to know for now." Clara's eyes met Jonah's briefly. "I'm sorry," she said. "They came in through the store. I couldn't—" "Quiet," Harris snapped, pressing the barrel of his revolver against her temple. "That's unnecessary, Harris," Markson said mildly. "Mrs. Reed knows better than to try anything foolish." He turned his attention back to Jonah. "You've put me in an awkward position, Rye. First you interfere with my personal business, then you abscond with my child, and now I hear you've entered into a fraudulent marriage with my former employee." "Nothing fraudulent about it," Jonah replied. "Legal and binding, witnessed and signed. A desperate ploy that won't stand up in court." Markson's confident smile never wavered. "Judge Harrow has already issued a temporary custody order, placing the child in my care pending tomorrow's hearing." "Then why the midnight visit? Why not wait for your rigged hearing?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Markson's face. "I prefer to resolve matters efficiently, without unnecessary complications." He gestured toward a chair across from him. "Sit. Let's discuss this like civilized men." Jonah remained standing. "There's nothing to discuss." "I disagree." Markson's tone hardened slightly. "I'm prepared to be generous, despite your interference. $20,000. Enough for you to start a new life far from Wyoming territory. All you have to do is walk away." The sum was staggering, more than Jonah could earn in years of bounty hunting. Yet the offer only hardened his resolve. "And Anna? What happens to her?" "Anna made her choices," Markson said dismissively. "She'll face the consequences." "Like being left to die in a blizzard?" Jonah's finger tightened imperceptibly on the trigger. "Or being shot when she became inconvenient?" Markson's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Rye. Those are serious accusations without evidence. I was there. I saw what you did. Your word against mine. And in this territory, my word carries considerably more weight." Markson spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. "But I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. $20,000. Final offer." Clara made a small noise of disgust. "Don't listen to him, Jonah. He offered James money, too, right before—" Harris silenced her with a rough shove. "The boss said, 'Quiet, woman.'" The movement disrupted the careful balance of the standoff. In the split second of distraction, Jonah made his decision. His left hand reached for the kitchen lamp, hurling it against the far wall. Glass shattered, kerosene splashed, and flames erupted in the sudden darkness. Simultaneously, he fired a shot that struck the floor inches from Markson's feet. The chaos was immediate. Harris fired blindly, his shot going wide as Clara dropped to the floor. Markson dove for cover behind the heavy oak table. Jonah seized the moment, grabbing Clara's arm and pulling her toward the back door. "The store!" she gasped as they burst into the alley. "They'll burn it down!" "No time," Jonah replied, pushing her ahead of him as bullets splintered the door frame behind them. "Samuels, now!" They ran through the darkness, weaving between buildings, the sounds of pursuit fading as they took the twisted back alleys that only longtime residents would know. By the time they reached the blacksmith shop, Clara was breathing hard but still moving with determined energy. Samuel opened the door at their first knock, taking in their disheveled appearance with a single glance. Markson, he said. It wasn't a question. They took Hope, Clara gasped, stepping inside, broke into the store, held me at gunpoint. Samuel's expression darkened. Are you hurt? No, but they know about the marriage. She turned to Jonah. They were waiting for you. Jonah holstered his weapon, his mind racing. How did they find out so quickly? Markson has eyes and ears everywhere, Samuel replied, securing the door behind them. Come, down to the cellar. It's safer there. The blacksmith's cellar was as solid as Samuel had promised. Stone walls, a heavy trapdoor accessed through the shop floor, and a small ventilation shaft providing fresh air. It was furnished sparingly but adequately with a cot, several crates serving as chairs, and shelves stocked with provisions. Used to be a station on the Underground Railroad, Samuel explained, lighting a lantern. Habit made me keep it ready, even after the war ended. Good habit, Jonah acknowledged, pacing the confined space. We need to find Hope. Most likely at Markson's townhouse, Clara said, accepting the cup of water Samuel offered her. It's on Hill Street, where all the money lives. Has a housekeeper named Mrs. Givens, who does whatever he asks, no questions. Guarded? Always. At least 2 men, sometimes more. Jonah stopped pacing. I need to get to Dunn. Too risky, Samuel cautioned. They'll be watching for you, now. Dunn will come here, Clara assured him. Once he hears what happened, we just need to wait. Waiting had never been Jonah's strong suit. Every minute that passed was another minute Hope was in Markson's custody. Another minute the fragile infant might be used as leverage or worse. Tell me about this hearing tomorrow, he said, trying to channel his anxiety into planning. Samuel settled his bulk onto a sturdy crate. 10 o'clock at the courthouse. Judge Harrow presiding. Markson will present his claim to paternity and demand full custody, likely arguing that Anna is unfit due to her condition and circumstances. And our marriage? I filed the paperwork with the county clerk before closing today. It's legal and recorded. Samuel's expression was grim, but Harrow might choose to disregard it, claiming it was performed under duress or for fraudulent purposes. What about Anna? Will she be there? Clara and Samuel exchanged glances. Felder says she's still too weak to be moved safely, Clara said gently. Her testimony would help, but without her there, it's my word against Markson's, Jonah finished, with a judge already in his pocket. The cellar fell silent except for the distant sounds of the town settling into night. Jonah felt the walls closing in, options narrowing with each passing minute. Going after Hope directly meant risking a firefight in which she might be harmed. Waiting for the hearing meant playing by Markson's rules on his territory. A soft knock at the trap door interrupted his thoughts. Samuel drew his revolver, a well-worn army Colt, before cautiously lifting the heavy wood. Sheriff Dunn descended the ladder, his weathered face grim in the lantern light. You folks have stirred up one hell of a hornet's nest, he said without preamble. They took Hope, Jonah replied. Markson's men. I know. Got the report from Deputy Harris that you assaulted them and set fire to Clara's kitchen when they attempted to serve a legal custody order. Ned Dunn's tone made it clear what he thought of that version. The mayor's authorized a manhunt. Every gun for hire in town is looking for you with orders to shoot if you resist. And you? Clara asked. Where do you stand, Thomas? Dunn removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. Where I've always stood, against Markson and everything he represents. He fixed his gaze on Jonah. But this isn't going to be resolved with gunplay. Not if you want that child safe. What do you suggest? Face him in court. Challenge him legally. Jonah laughed bitterly. With his bought judge, his lawyers, against a bounty hunter with no standing. Against a legally married man defending his family, Dunn corrected. The marriage changes things, Rye. Harrow may be in Markson's pocket, but even he has to maintain some semblance of legal propriety. And what about Hope? She stays with Markson until then? Dunn's expression softened slightly. The child is safe for now. Markson won't harm his own blood, especially not when she's his leverage. You don't know what he's capable of, Jonah said darkly. I know exactly what he's capable of, Dunn snapped, a flash of old pain crossing his face. I was at Little Wolf's camp too, remember? I saw what he did to those women and children. I tried to stop him then and failed. I've been trying to make it right ever since, Marzo. The silence that followed was heavy with shared knowledge and bitter memories. There's something else you should know, Dunn continued finally. Anna's gone. What? Clara gasped. Disappeared from Felder's office sometime in the last hour. No signs of struggle, no blood, just gone. Jonah's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Markson. That's my guess. But there's no proof, and Felder swears he was only away from her room for a few minutes. Dunn's expression was troubled. The timing's too perfect to be coincidence. He's eliminating witnesses, Samuel said quietly. First Hope, now Anna. Or ensuring Anna can't testify at tomorrow's hearing, Clara added. Jonah felt a cold fury building inside him. Not the hot rage of immediate action, but something deeper and more dangerous. Where would he take her? If he wanted her dead, he wouldn't bother taking her anywhere, Dunn replied bluntly, which means he wants her alive, at least for now. The ranch, Clara suggested. It's isolated, heavily guarded, perfect place to keep someone hidden. Too obvious, Samuel countered. Markson's smarter than that. Dunn frowned considering. There's his hunting lodge up in the foothills, only accessible by one trail, easy to defend. Or the old mining office at Copper Creek, Clara said. He uses it sometimes for private business. The possibilities seemed endless, each more remote and defensible than the last. Markson's empire covered hundreds of square miles of territory, much of it wild and isolated. We're wasting time, Jonah said, moving toward the ladder. I need to find them before the hearing. Dunn blocked his path. And do what, exactly? Storm Markson's property alone against armed guards? Even if you found them, you'd be dead before you got within 100 yards. Better than sitting here doing nothing. It's better than throwing away any chance Anna and Hope have. Dunn's voice was sharp with authority. Think, man, Markson wants you to react exactly like this. Impulsively, emotionally. He's counting on it. The truth in the sheriff's words penetrated Jonah's anger. Markson was baiting a trap, and he was about to walk straight into it. Then what do you suggest? He asked, forcing himself to calm down. We use Markson's plan against him, Dunn replied. He expects you to come charging in like a bull. Instead, we appear at the hearing tomorrow, challenge him legally, and force him to reveal his hand in public. While Anna and Hope remain as prisoners? While we buy time. Dunn's expression was grim but determined. I've sent telegrams to the federal marshal's office in Cheyenne, called in some old favors. They won't get here in time for the hearing, but if we can delay long enough. Samuel had been listening quietly, his blacksmith's hands folded in thought. There might be another option, he said slowly. A way to find out where Anna and Hope are without tipping our hand. All eyes turned to him. Markson has a man named Watts, skinny fellow, twitchy, does odd us, carries messages. Samuel's deep voice rumbled in the confined space. He drinks at the Red Dog Saloon most nights. Talks too much when he's in his cups. You think he might know where Markson's keeping them? Clara asked. Worth finding out. Samuel turned to Dunn. The Red Dog's outside your jurisdiction. The county deputies don't patrol there much. Dunn nodded slowly. Markson's men will be watching for Rye, not you. I could go, Clara offered. No one would question a widow bringing supplies to the blacksmith. And I could pay a visit to the Red Dog, Samuel added. Watts knows me. Wouldn't suspect anything unusual if I bought him a drink or two. Jonah found himself reluctantly impressed by their willingness to risk themselves for people they barely knew. It spoke to the depth of their hatred for Markson, but also to something else, a kind of frontier solidarity he'd forgotten existed. It's still a long shot, he said. Better than a suicide mission, Dunn replied. Besides, there's one more card we haven't played yet. What's that? 2 wolves. The name hung in the air like smoke. 2 wolves. Wolves, a Cheyenne warrior who had survived Little Wolf's camp and now lived in the hills outside Redemption, a ghost to most white settlers, but a legend among the few natives still in the area. You think he'd help us? Jonah asked skeptically. After what happened to his people? He might help Anna and the child, Dunn said. His wife and infant daughter are among those killed at the camp. He has no love for Markson, that's certain. How do we even find him? I know where he camps, Samuel said. He comes to me for metalwork sometimes. Knives, arrowheads. We have an understanding. Dunn nodded decisively. Then that's our plan. Samuel contacts two wolves, sees if he'll scout Markson's properties. Clara tries to gather information in town. I'll delay the hearing as long as possible tomorrow. And you, Rye, I'll be at that hearing, Jonah finished. But if we find where they're keeping Anna and Hope before then, all bets are off. Fair enough. Dunn moved toward the ladder. I need to get back before I'm missed. Markson's got Harris and his other cronies watching my every move. Before he left, the sheriff placed a hand on Jonah's shoulder. I know what you're feeling, son. That cold fury that makes you want to tear down mountains to get to them. But remember, Markson's counting on that. He wants you acting on emotion instead of thought. I'll remember, Jonah promised. After Dunn had gone, Clara prepared to leave as well, her face set with determined purpose. Be careful, Jonah told her. Markson's already shown he's willing to hurt you. I've been careful for 3 years, she replied with quiet dignity. Ever since James died. Sometimes careful isn't enough. She squeezed his arm briefly. Find them, Jonah, whatever it takes. Samuel left soon after, heading for the hills where two wolves made a solitary camp. The blacksmith moved with surprising stealth for a man of his size, a skill no doubt honed during his days helping enslaved people escape to freedom. Alone in the cellar, Jonah finally had time to process the events of the past few days. From bounty hunter to husband and stepfather, from lone wolf to the center of a resistance against Markson's tyranny, the transformation was dizzying in its speed and implications. Hope's face appeared in his mind, tiny, vulnerable, yet somehow determined even in her first days of life. Then Anna, pale but defiant in her sickbed, trusting him with everything she had left. He'd promised to protect them both, and within hours he'd failed. The cold fury Dunn had recognized built inside him, but now he channeled it differently. Not into rash action, but into methodical planning. If Markson wanted a war, Jonah would give him one, but on his terms, not Markson's. He checked his weapons, counting ammunition and assessing options. The Spencer rifle was reliable at distance, but slow to reload. His Colt Navy revolver was faster, but limited to 6 shots. He had a boot knife and his wits. Against Markson's small army, it wasn't much. But he also had something Markson didn't expect. Allies who hated the rancher enough to risk everything against him. Hours passed, Jonah dozed fitfully on the cot, waking at every sound from above. Shortly before dawn, the trapdoor opened and Samuel descended the ladder, his expression unreadable in the dim light. 2 wolves will help, he said without preamble. He's already gone to scout Markson's properties. Just like that? Why would he risk himself for us? Samuel settled his bulk onto a crate. Not for us, for the child. His deep voice softened slightly. There is nothing more sacred to the Cheyenne than children, even the children of their enemies. When will we hear from him? When he has something to tell us. Samuel shrugged massive shoulders. Could be hours. Could be days. The thought of waiting days was unbearable. The hearing is in 6 hours. I know, but 2 wolves moves like shadow. When he wants to, if Anna and Hope are on any of Markson's properties, he'll find them. Samuel handed Jonah a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Food, you should eat. The simple bread and dried meat tasted like ashes in Jonah's mouth, but he forced himself to eat anyway. He'd need his strength, whatever came next. Clara returned as the town was waking, slipping into the blacksmith shop through the back door. Her expression was grim but determined. Markson's men are everywhere, she reported, watching the doctor's office, the sheriff's office, even my store. They've got the courthouse surrounded already, hours before the hearing. Any word of Anna or Hope? Jonah asked. She shook her head. Nothing specific, but I overheard one of Markson's men mention something about the cabin to Harris. Said everything was secure for now. The cabin? Samuel frowned. Could be anywhere. Markson owns 12 cabins across the territory. Unless, Jonah straightened, a terrible suspicion forming. What if it's the same cabin where I found them, where Markson shot Anna? Clara's eyes widened. It would be bold, almost too obvious. Which might be exactly why he chose it, Jonah replied. Who would think he'd return to the scene of his crime? It fits his pattern, Samuel acknowledged. Markson has a twisted sense of irony, and that cabin is isolated, easy to guard. Can you describe its location? Claire asked. Jonah did his best, but the blizzard had obscured landmarks, and he'd been focused on survival rather than navigation. It's northeast of town, maybe 15 miles, near a split cedar on a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. There was a creek nearby, frozen over. Samuel nodded slowly. Sounds like Bear Creek Valley. There are several old trapper cabins in that area. One of them used to belong to a man named Howell before Markson forced him out. How soon can you get word to Two Wolves? I can't. He's already out there somewhere. Samuel's expression was troubled. But if the hearing's at 10, and you want to check this cabin first, we'd need to leave now, Clara finished. And even then, it would be cutting it close. Jonah made his decision. I'm going. If they're there, I'll find a way to get them out. If not, I can still make it back for the hearing. Not alone, Samuel said firmly. I'm coming with you. And who will be at the hearing if we're both gone or caught? Jonah countered. No, you need to file our response to Markson's custody petition. Make sure the marriage certificate is entered into evidence. Samuel didn't look happy, but he nodded reluctantly. Clara can get you a horse from the livery. Jenkins owes me a favor. He'll ask no questions. And I'll create a distraction, Clara added. Something to draw attention away from the North Road. No, Jonah said firmly. You've risked enough already. This isn't your decision, Mr. Rye. Clara's tone brooked no argument. Markson destroyed my life once. I'll be damned if I let him do it to another woman and child. Her eyes glittered with unshed tears. Besides, I promised Hope I'd keep her safe. I intend to honor that promise. The determination in her voice silenced any further objection. This was no longer just Jonah's fight. It had become a mission of justice for all those Markson had wronged over the years. Within an hour, Jonah was mounted on a sturdy bay gelding, supplies secured behind the saddle, weapons checked and loaded. Clara had provided a rough map showing the likely location of the cabin, while Samuel had given him a spare revolver, a hefty Remington 44 with enough stopping power to drop a man at 50 paces. Remember, Samuel said as Jonah prepared to leave through the back of the smithy, the hearing's at 10. If you're not back by then, I'll stall as long as possible. And if I find them, Samuel's expression was grave, then you do what needs doing. But remember what Dunn said. Markson's expecting you to come in guns blazing. Don't give him what he wants. Clara handed him a small package wrapped in oilcloth. For Hope, she said simply, when you find her. With a final nod to his unlikely allies, Jonah urged the gelding forward into the gray light of dawn. The morning air was crisp but not bitter, the snow from the recent storm already beginning to melt in patches where sunlight struck. Good tracking weather and good visibility for anyone watching the roads. He kept to the tree line as much as possible, avoiding the main trails and skirting the scattered homesteads that marked the outskirts of Redemption. Only when the town was well behind him did he allow the horse to pick up speed, eating up the miles toward Bear Creek Valley. The landscape grew wilder as he rode, the settled farmlands giving way to rugged foothills and stands of pine that had never known an axe. This was the country Jonah knew best, the untamed spaces where a man could disappear if he knew the ways of wind and weather. As a scout, he'd learned to read this land like others read books. Now he scanned it for signs of human presence, broken branches, disturbed snow, anything that might betray Markson's men. About 10 miles out, he found his first clue. Hoof prints in a muddy patch beside a creek crossing, fresh enough that water hadn't yet seeped into them. Multiple horses moving at a steady pace rather than a gallop, not running from something, but not dawdling either. Purposeful. Jonah dismounted, examining the tracks more closely. At least 4 horses, maybe 5. One set deeper than the others, carrying double perhaps, Anna and one of Markson's men. Hope would be small enough to carry in a saddlebag or wrapped against someone's chest, as Jonah himself had carried her through the storm. He remounted, following the tracks with renewed urgency. They led northeast, toward the area where Samuel believed the cabin stood. Jonah's suspicions grew stronger with each mile. The sun was climbing toward mid-morning when he caught his first glimpse of smoke rising above the trees ahead. Thin, almost invisible against the pale sky, but unmistakable to a trained scout's eye. Someone had a fire going. Jonah reined in, tethering the horse in a dense thicket where it wouldn't be easily spotted. From here, he'd proceed on foot, quieter, less visible, and able to retreat quickly if necessary. The Spencer rifle felt reassuring in his hands as he moved through the trees, each step placed with deliberate care to avoid snapping branches or disturbing the forest floor. The smoke grew thicker as he approached, and soon he could make out the dark shape of a cabin nestled in a small clearing. It was the same cabin where he'd found Anna and Hope. He recognized the split cedar nearby, the orientation of the building, the crude construction. Memory flashed, Anna bleeding on the floor, Hope's tiny form blue with cold, Markson's smug face as he claimed military necessity. Jonah pushed the memories aside, focusing on the present. Two horses were tethered outside the cabin. A man sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, smoking a cigarette. Another patrolled the perimeter, moving with the practiced vigilance of someone used to guard duty. Markson was nowhere in sight, but the presence of his men confirmed Jonah's suspicions. Anna and Hope were here, or had been, at least recently. He settled into position behind a fallen log, studying the scene. The cabin had only two visible entrances. The front door, visible from his position, and presumably a back door on the far side. Two small windows, shuttered against the morning chill. The guards were alert but relaxed, suggesting they weren't expecting trouble anytime soon. Jonah considered his options. A direct assault would be suicide. Even if he managed to take out both guards, any commotion would endanger Anna and Hope inside. Stealth might work, but he'd need a distraction. The decision was taken from his hands when a twig snapped behind him. Jonah whirled, rifle raised, to find himself staring into the impassive face of a Cheyenne warrior. The man was dressed in a mixture of traditional clothing and cast-off white man's garments, his hair braided with feathers and beads. A bow was strung across his back, and a cavalry-issue knife hung at his belt. "Two wolves," Jonah breathed, lowering his weapon slightly. The warrior nodded once, his dark eyes never leaving Jonah's face. "You are the one who saves the child," he said in accented but clear English. It wasn't a question, but Jonah nodded anyway. "Anna and Hope are in there. Markson's men have them." Two Wolves' expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes at the mention of Markson's name. "The woman is there," he confirmed. "The baby also. 4 men guard them, 2 outside, 2 inside." "How do you know?" "I watch, I listen." Two Wolves pointed to the cabin's chimney. "They keep fire. Smoke means they stay." "Did you see Markson?" "The yellow hair left before dawn, spoke to his men, said to keep the woman alive until he returns." Two Wolves' face remained stoic, but his voice carried a subtle tension. "He said the child is his blood, must not be harmed." Relief flooded through Jonah. They were alive, at least for now, but the reprieve might be temporary, especially if Jonah failed to appear at the hearing. "I need to get them out," he said. Two Wolves studied him as if measuring his worth. "Why do you risk yourself for them?" "The woman is not your blood. She's my wife now," Jonah replied simply. "And I made a promise." Something like approval flickered across the warrior's face. "Promises matter," he acknowledged, "but 4 men with guns against 1 is bad medicine." "2, Jonah corrected, "if you'll help." Two Wolves was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving between Jonah and the cabin. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of memory. "At Little Wolf's camp, I watched yellow hair kill my woman, kill my daughter." His hand moved unconsciously to a necklace of beads and small bones, partially hidden beneath his clothing. "I could not stop him then. The soldiers were too many." "I know," Jonah said quietly. "I was there. I didn't stop him either." When their eyes met in shared guilt and regret, the scout who had followed orders and the warrior who had hidden to survive, both haunted by what they had witnessed and failed to prevent. "Now Yellowhair would take another child," Two Wolves continued. "This I cannot allow." He drew his knife, testing its edge with his thumb. "I will help you, but we must be like smoke, silent, everywhere, gone before they know." "What do you suggest?" Two Wolves pointed to the far side of the clearing. "There is a stream there. The guard will go soon to relieve himself. Men always do after morning coffee." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "When he goes, I will take him." No sound. "And the one on the porch?" "You must draw him away. Make him curious, not afraid. A curious man comes alone. An afraid man calls for help. The plan was simple but dangerous. If either guard raised an alarm, Anna and Hope would pay the price. But Jonah saw no better alternative. How long until the hearing in town? Two Wolves asked. Less than 2 hours now. The warrior nodded. Then we have no time for better plans. He pointed to a tall pine near the edge of the clearing. Go there. Wait for my signal. As two wolves melted into the forest with silent efficiency, Jonah made his way to the designated position. The pine afforded a clear view of the cabin while providing adequate cover. The minutes stretched endlessly as he waited, watching the guards go about their routine. True to Two Wolves' prediction, the patrolling guard eventually headed toward the stream, disappearing from view behind the cabin. Jonah tensed, knowing that Two Wolves would be making his move. The porch guard remained oblivious, still smoking and occasionally scanning the tree line without real interest. After what seemed an eternity, a bird call sounded from the direction of the stream, 3 short notes followed by a longer trill. Not a call that belonged to any bird in these woods at this season. Two Wolves' signal. Now it was Jonah's turn. He had to draw the remaining guard away from the cabin without alerting the men inside. A direct approach would be suicide. Instead, he needed to create curiosity, as Two Wolves had suggested. Reaching into his pocket, Jonah withdrew Clara's package, the gift she'd given him for Hope. Inside was a small silver rattle, lovingly polished and clearly cherished. A child's toy, perhaps meant for the baby Clara had never had. With silent apology, Jonah removed the rattle and placed the oilcloth over the mouth of his canteen. He struck the rattle against the canteen, creating a metallic clink that carried clearly in the still morning air. The guard on the porch straightened, head turning toward the sound. Jonah repeated it, then moved quietly to a new position several yards away before making the sound again. It worked. The guard stood, rifle ready but not raised, and stepped off the porch. Curiosity rather than alarm showed in his posture as he moved cautiously toward the source of the mysterious sound. Jonah retreated deeper into the trees, drawing the guard further from the cabin with each repetition of the strange noise. When the man was finally out of sight of the cabin, Jonah circled behind him, moving as silently as his scout training allowed. The guard never heard him coming. Jonah's strike with the rifle butt was precise, enough force to render the man unconscious without killing him. The guard crumpled without a sound. Quickly binding and gagging the unconscious man, Jonah dragged him deeper into the underbrush where he wouldn't be immediately discovered. Then he made his way back toward the cabin where Two Wolves waited at the edge of the clearing. Inside, the warrior whispered, 2 men, one by door, one with woman and child. Armed, pistols, no rifles. Jonah considered their options. We need to separate them somehow. Get one to come outside. Two Wolves nodded toward the tethered horses. Worst arrow, he suggested. Into saddle. Makes smoke. Scares horses. Man comes to check. It was risky. The commotion might alert both men rather than just one. But time was running short, and they had no better plan. Do it, Jonah decided. Two Wolves knocked an arrow, wrapping the tip with a strip of cloth from his shirt. With a small flint, he set the cloth smoldering, then drew and released in one fluid motion. The arrow struck a saddle blanket draped over the hitching post. Within seconds, the dry fabric began to smoke. The horses snorted and stamped, sensing danger. The smoke thickened, and one of the horses whinnied in alarm. Inside the cabin, voices rose in confusion. The door opened, and a man stepped out, hand on his holstered revolver. What the hell? He began before spotting the smoldering blanket. Fire! The horses are... He never finished the sentence. Two Wolves' second arrow took him in the throat, dropping him instantly. Now, the warrior said, already moving toward the cabin. Jonah was right behind him, Spencer rifle ready as they burst through the door. The remaining guard was caught completely by surprise, halfway out of his chair, with his gun only partially drawn. Jonah's rifle butt caught him squarely in the temple, and he collapsed in a heap. Anna was there, tied to a chair, a gag in her mouth but her eyes burning with recognition and relief. And in a crude cradle beside her lay Hope, swaddled in blankets, miraculously asleep despite the commotion. Anna, Jonah breathed, moving quickly to remove her gag and bindings. Are you all right? Did they hurt you? No, she gasped as the gag came free. Just scared me, took me from the doctor's office in the night. Her gaze moved to two wolves standing silent guard by the door. Who? A friend, Jonah assured her, working on the ropes binding her wrists. We need to move quickly. The hearing's in less than 2 hours. Hearing? Markson's trying to take legal custody of Hope. Claims he's the father. Anna's face hardened. He is the father, biologically, but he has no right to her, not after what he did. The ropes finally gave way and Anna stumbled as she tried to stand. She was still weak from her wound, her face pale with exertion and fear. I can't leave, she said, gesturing to the crude bandages visible beneath her torn dress. I can barely walk. You have to, Jonah insisted. Without you at the hearing to testify about what Markson did. No time, two wolves interrupted from his position by the door. Riders coming, many horses. Jonah's heart sank, reinforcements from town most likely. Or perhaps Markson himself, returning to ensure his plan proceeded smoothly. Their window of escape was closing rapidly. How many? Jonah asked, his mind racing through escape options, even as he checked his weapons. Two wolves peered through a gap in the shuttered window. 5 riders, armed, coming fast. Markson? Yellowhair leads them. Jonah made his decision instantly. We can't outrun them, not with Anna injured. We make our stand here. He turned to Anna, who was already lifting Hopi from the cradle. Get to the back room. Stay low, away from windows. She nodded, determination overriding fear in her pale face. What about the hearing? First we survive, then we worry about the hearing. Jonah helped her to the small back room, a cramped space barely large enough for a narrow cot and wooden chest. Barricade the door when I close it. Don't open it for anyone but me or two wolves. Jonah, she caught his sleeve as he turned to go, hope clutched protectively against her chest. If something happens, if you can't, I'll get you both out of here, he promised. Just keep Hope quiet and stay down. Back in the main room, two wolves had already dragged the unconscious guard behind a storage barrel. They've seen the man outside, he reported, coming more careful now, spreading out. Jonah took position beside one window, the Spencer rifle ready. We need to hold them off long enough for Anna to recover some strength. Maybe wait for nightfall. Two wolves shook his head. Yellowhair will not wait. He will burn cabin if he must. The grim assessment matched Jonah's own read of the situation. Markson wouldn't risk a prolonged siege that might attract attention or allow for rescue. He'd end this quickly, one way or another. Then we need to even the odds. Jonah glanced around the cabin, considering their defensive position. The walls were solid logs, good against bullets but vulnerable to fire. Only 2 windows and 2 doors meant limited angles of attack, but also limited escape routes. I count 4 horses outside the cabin. Markson's voice carried clearly from the edge of the clearing. But 5 men were assigned here. Someone's gotten careless. 2 wolves and Jonah exchanged glances. Markson was probing, trying to determine what he was facing. Jonah Rye, Markson called again. I know you're in there. This doesn't have to end badly. Send out the woman and child, and you can ride away. I'm a reasonable man. Reasonable men don't shoot unarmed women, Jonah replied, pitching his voice to Carrie, or leave infants to freeze in blizzards. A pause, then Markson's voice again, harder now. So be it. You've got 1 minute to reconsider before my men open fire. Think carefully about the woman and child you claim to be protecting. 2 wolves had moved to the back of the cabin, bow ready, watching through a crack in the wall. 2 men circle behind, he reported softly. 3 stay in front, Yellowhair in middle. Can you take the ones in back? Jonah asked. The warrior nodded once. Silent, but leaves you alone against 3. I've faced worse odds. A grim smile touched 2 wolves' lips. Yes, at Little Wolf's camp, we both have. He moved toward the back door. When shooting starts in front, I strike from behind. As 2 wolves slipped out, Jonah mentally mapped the clearing. The 3 men in front would likely take cover behind trees at the edge of the clearing. They had the advantage of mobility and multiple firing angles. His own position was fixed, but the cabin walls provided solid cover. If he could take down even one of them in the initial exchange, it might buy enough time for 2 wolves to eliminate the flanking threat and tip the balance. Time's up, Rye, Markson called. Last chance. Here's my answer, Jonah muttered, and fired through the window at the tree where Markson's voice had come from. The shot splintered bark but likely hit nothing vital. It was enough to trigger the response, however. Gunfire erupted from the tree line, bullets thudding into the cabin walls and shattering what remained of the windows. Jonah kept low, counting shots and tracking positions based on muzzle flashes and sound. One shooter to the left of Markson, using a repeating rifle similar to Jonah's Spencer. Another to the right with what sounded like a revolver, firing less frequently. And Markson himself, still behind the central tree, apparently directing rather than participating in the gunfight. When the first volley subsided, Jonah raised up just enough to sight the leftmost shooter. The Spencer's report was loud in the confined space, but the shot found its mark. A cry of pain confirmed a hit, though probably not fatal. The return fire intensified, forcing Jonah back down. He crawled to the other window for a different angle, pausing to listen for any sounds from the back of the cabin. Nothing yet from Two Wolves, either good news, meaning silent efficiency, or bad news, meaning the warrior had been caught before he could act. "You're outnumbered and surrounded, Rye," Markson called during a lull in the shooting. "This isn't a fight you can win." Jonah didn't bother responding. Words were just a distraction now, a way for Markson to pinpoint his position or draw his attention while his men maneuvered. A new sound caught his attention, the soft creak of a floorboard from the back room where Anna and Hope were hiding. He glanced that way, concerned that a stray bullet might have penetrated the thin interior wall. The momentary distraction nearly cost him his life. A bullet whizzed through the window, so close he felt its passage disturb the air near his cheek. Too close. Jonah refocused, sighting through the window at movement near the tree line. He fired twice in rapid succession, forcing the attackers back into cover. Then, from the rear of the clearing, a shout of alarm cut through the gunfire. One of Markson's flanking men had discovered a problem, likely in the form of a Cheyenne warrior with a very sharp knife. "Behind us," the man yelled. "Indian, look out!" The distraction was exactly what Jonah needed. As Markson and his remaining frontline gunmen turned to address the new threat, Jonah rose and fired with deliberate precision. The gunman dropped, clutching his shoulder. Now it was 3 against 2. Better odds, but still not good, especially with Anna and Hope trapped in the middle. A flurry of movement at the back of the clearing told Jonah that Two Wolves was engaged with at least one of the flanking men. Judging by the lack of gunfire from that direction, the warrior was keeping his opponent too busy to use his weapon effectively. That left Markson and one wounded but still dangerous gunman in front. Jonah needed to end this quickly before Markson could regroup or call in more men from town. "It's over, Markson," he shouted. "Your men are down or occupied. Walk away while you can." "It's never over, Rye," Markson called back, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Not until I say it is." A new sound entered the chaos, a baby's cry, high and frightened. Hope had awakened, no doubt terrified by the gunfire and shouting. Jonah felt his blood run cold. Markson would hear it too, would know exactly where the infant was located in the cabin. The back room with its thin walls suddenly seemed like a death trap rather than a sanctuary. He needed to move, to draw fire away from that vulnerable spot. Without hesitation, Jonah charged through the front door, firing as he went. The reckless move caught Markson's remaining gunmen by surprise. The man fired hastily, missing, and Jonah's return shot caught him in the leg. Now it was down to Markson himself. Jonah rolled behind a woodpile at the edge of the porch, reloading the Spencer with practiced efficiency despite cold fingers and the chaos of battle. "Your men are down," Jonah called. "It's just you and me now, Markson." "Not quite," came the reply, closer than expected. Too late, Jonah realized his mistake. While he'd focused on the threats from the tree line, Markson had circled around to the side of the cabin, the side adjacent to the back room where Ennio and Hope were hiding. The sound of splintering wood confirmed his fear. Markson was breaking through the shuttered window of the back room. Jonah abandoned his cover, racing around the side of the cabin. He rounded the corner just in time to see Markson halfway through the window, revolver drawn. "Stop!" Jonah shouted, raising the Spencer. Markson froze, then slowly turned his head. The two men locked eyes across 15 feet of blood-stained snow. "You won't shoot," Markson said with calm certainty. "Not with the woman and child in the line of fire." He was right, and they both knew it. At this angle, any shot that hit Markson might continue through to harm Anna or Hope inside. Step away from the window, Jonah ordered, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Markson smiled, the expression cold and calculating. I think not. In fact, he turned back toward the room's interior. Anna, dear, bring my daughter to the window, or your so-called husband dies right now. Silence from within. Then Anna's voice, strained but defiant. She's not yours anymore. You gave up any right to her when you tried to kill us both. Markson's smile didn't waver, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Don't be foolish, girl. The law's on my side. The judge is on my side. This sad charade of a marriage won't change anything except how much suffering you endure before the inevitable. The law recognizes a father's rights, Anna replied, her voice growing stronger. But what about a mother's? What about a child's right to safety? Will you tell the court how you shot me and left us to die? Who would believe you, a servant girl with delusions of grandeur, against a respected businessman and civic leader? Markson's confidence was absolute. No one will take your word over mine. They might take mine. The new voice came from behind Jonah. He didn't dare turn, keeping his rifle trained on Markson, but he recognized the weathered tones of Sheriff Dunn. This doesn't concern you, Thomas, Markson said, his expression hardening. Go back to town before you make a mistake you can't undo. Like the mistake at Little Wolf's camp? Dunn stepped up beside Jonah, his own revolver steady in his hand. I've been silent too long about that day, Emmett. About the orders you gave that had nothing to do with military necessity and everything to do with the gold you found on their land. Markson's face flushed with anger. Careful, Sheriff. Slander is a serious charge. It's not slander if it's true. Dunn took another step forward. And I've got the sworn statements of 3 other survivors from our unit, men who've been carrying the guilt of what you made them do for 15 years. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Markson's features. You're bluffing. Am I? Why do you think I've survived as sheriff all these years despite your attempts to replace me? Those affidavits are in a safe place, with instructions to send them to the territorial governor and every newspaper from here to Denver if anything happens to me. Jonah watched the calculation in Markson's eyes, weighing options, considering angles, looking for leverage that was rapidly disappearing. Step away from the window, Emmett, Dunn said, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. It's over. For a moment, it seemed Markson might comply. Then his expression hardened into something beyond reason or negotiation. Nothing's over until I say it's over, he snarled, and lunged through the window into the room. Jonah and Dunn rushed forward, but they were too late to prevent Markson's entry. A scream from Anna, followed by Hope's frightened wail, confirmed the worst. Stay back, Markson shouted from inside, or I'll put a bullet in both of them. Jonah froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the broken window, he could see Anna backed against the far wall, Hope clutched protectively against her chest. Markson stood between them and the door, his revolver pointed not at Anna, but at the infant. You won't shoot your own child, Dunn said, though his voice lacked conviction. Won't I? Markson's laugh was hollow. Better dead than raised by trash like them. Better dead than a reminder of my one moment of weakness. This isn't weakness, Emmett. It's madness. Dunn's voice had shifted, becoming almost gentle. Think about what you're doing. Think about what comes after. After? Markson seemed genuinely confused by the concept. There is no after. There's only now, and who controls it? Who wins? In that moment, Jonah saw clearly what they were dealing with. Not just a corrupt businessman or a violent man, but someone who had moved beyond the normal boundaries of humanity. Someone who would destroy anything, even his own flesh and blood, rather than lose control. Let them go, Jonah said quietly. Take me instead. That's what you really want, isn't it? The man who defied you. Markson's attention shifted, his eyes finding Jonah through the broken window. You think it's that simple? That this is about you? He laughed again, the sound brittle and wrong. You're nothing, a footnote. This is about what's mine, what's always been mine. Hope's cries had intensified, the sound piercing the tense atmosphere like physical pain. Anna whispered soothingly to her, her eyes never leaving Markson's gun. She's hungry, Anna said, her voice surprisingly steady. She needs to be fed. Shut up, Markson snapped. No one cares what it needs. She, Anna corrected with quiet dignity. Your daughter is a she, not an it. She has a name. Hope. Something shifted in Markson's expression. Confusion, perhaps, or a flicker of unwanted recognition. Hope, he repeated, as if tasting the word. For just a moment, his gun wavered. It was all the opening Jonah needed. He fired through the window, not at Markson, but at the oil lamp hanging on the wall behind him. The glass shattered, oil splashing and igniting instantly in a burst of flame and smoke. Markson instinctively recoiled from the fire, his attention and aim diverted for a crucial second. Anna seized the moment, lunging for the door while shielding Hope with her body. The next few seconds were chaos. Dunn kicked in the door as Anna reached it, pulling her clear. Jonah fired again, forcing Markson away from the exit. The small room was filling with smoke, flames licking up the dry wooden walls with frightening speed. Get them to safety, Jonah shouted to Dunn, who was already leading Anna and Hope toward the tree line. Markson, trapped between advancing flames and Jonah's rifle, made his decision. He fired twice through the smoke, the bullet splintering wood inches from Jonah's position, then charged toward the door. Jonah met him head-on, abandoning the rifle in favor of close-quarters combat. The two men collided with bone-jarring force, tumbling through the doorway onto the snow-covered ground outside. Markson was heavier, the strength of madness lending power to his blows. A punch caught Jonah on the temple, sending stars across his vision. Another to his ribs drove the air from his lungs. But Jonah had years of hard living and desperate fights behind him. He rolled with the next punch, using Markson's momentum to flip their positions. His own fist connected with Markson's jaw, snapping the man's head back. They fought in grim silence, neither wasting breath on threats or insults. This was beyond words now, a primal struggle as old as humanity itself. Behind them, the cabin was fully engulfed in flames, casting their struggle in hellish light. The heat scorched Jonah's back as Markson drove him closer to the inferno. Desperate, Jonah hooked a leg behind Markson's knee and twisted, breaking the rancher's balance. As they fell, Markson's head struck a fallen log with a sickening crack. He went limp instantly. Jonah rolled away, gasping for breath, his body screaming with pain from a dozen injuries. For a moment, he simply lay in the snow, watching blood seep from a cut above Markson's temple. Is he dead? Dunn's voice came from somewhere to his right. Jonah pulled himself to his knees, checking Markson's pulse. No, unconscious. Good. Dunn appeared at his side, helping him to his feet. I want him to stand trial, for all of it. Two wolves emerged from the trees, his expression impassive despite a bloody gash across his shoulder. Fire spreads, he observed. Forest will burn soon. Where are Anna and Hope? Jonah asked, suddenly frantic. Safe, Dunn assured him. I left them with my deputy by the horses. We need to go. Now. Together they dragged Markson's unconscious form away from the burning cabin. By the time they reached the horses tethered at the edge of the clearing, flames had engulfed the entire structure, sending sparks and burning debris into the surrounding trees. Anna sat mounted on one of the horses, Hope securely bundled against her chest. Her face was smudged with soot, her eyes wide with shock. But both she and the infant appeared unharmed. Jonah! Relief flooded her features as she saw him approach. I thought, when the cabin exploded, I'm all right, he assured her, though his battered body suggested otherwise. We're all right. Dunn's deputy, a young man named Wilson, who'd apparently ridden out with the sheriff, helped secure Markson across the saddle of one of the horses. The rancher was beginning to stir, moaning softly as consciousness returned. We need to get back to town, Dunn said urgently. The hearing starts in less than an hour. If we're not there, Harrow will rule in Markson's favor by default, regardless of the circumstances. Can you ride? Anna asked Jonah, her concern evident despite her own weakened state. He nodded, though the thought of the 15-mile journey sent stabs of pain through his abused body. I'll manage. Two wolves, who had been watching silently, stepped forward. I will not go to White Man's Town, he said, but I will testify if needed. Sheriff knows where to find me. Dunn nodded respectfully to the warrior. Your help won't be forgotten, Two Wolves. I'll make sure of that. The Cheyenne's gaze shifted to Jonah. You keep promise, he said simply, to woman and child. This is good medicine. With a final nod, he melted back into the forest as silently as he had appeared. The ride back to redemption was a grueling test of endurance. Jonah's ribs ached with every breath, and dry blood stiffened his clothing. Anna wasn't much better, the strain of the ordeal reopening her healing wound enough to seep blood through her dress. Only Hope seemed to have weathered the chaos relatively unscathed, sleeping peacefully against Anna's chest for most of the journey. Markson, secured to his saddle and flanked by Dunn and Deputy Wilson, had regained consciousness but remained sullen and silent. The calculating intelligence that had made him so dangerous was temporarily subdued by defeat and concussion, but Jonah knew better than to underestimate him. Even now, Markson would be planning his next move. They reached the outskirts of Redemption with barely 20 minutes to spare before the hearing. The town seemed unusually quiet. Most businesses closed, the streets nearly empty. "Everyone's at the courthouse," Wilson explained, noting Jonah's questioning glance. "Word got out about what was happening. Half the town turned up to watch." "And the other half?" Jonah asked. "Hiding in their homes, most likely," Dunn replied grimly, afraid of being seen taking sides. As they approached the courthouse, a two-story brick building that stood as the most imposing structure in Redemption, Jonah could see the deputy was right. A crowd had gathered on the steps and spilled into the street, murmuring among themselves as they awaited the drama to unfold. The sight of Sheriff Dunn escorting a bloodied Markson, followed by Jonah and Anna with the infant, caused a ripple of shocked silence to spread through the onlookers. Samuel Washington pushed through the crowd to meet them, his powerful frame creating a path where none existed. "Thank God," he said, relief evident in his deep voice. "We were starting to fear the worst." "Almost was the worst," Jonah replied, dismounting stiffly. "How's it looking inside?" "Judge Harrow's ready to rule in Markson's favor. Been making noises about abandonment of duty and contempt of court since you didn't show up on time." Samuel's expression darkened. "Got the mayor and half the town council backing him up. They're just waiting for the clock to strike 10. Dunn checked his pocket watch. 10 minutes, cutting it close. "There's more," Samuel added, lowering his voice. "Newspaper man from Denver showed up this morning. Been asking questions about Markson's business dealings, especially that land deal with the railroad." This was unexpected leverage. Dunn raised an eyebrow. "Territorial Commission finally taking an interest in our local corruption?" "Something like that. Clara's been filling him in on details." Samuel glanced at Markson, who was being helped, none too gently, from his horse by Deputy Wilson. "How do you want to play this, Sheriff?" "By the book," Dunn replied firmly. "Markson's under arrest for attempted kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. We'll add the older charges later, once the statements are properly filed." "And the hearing," Jonah asked, "goes forward as scheduled." Dunn straightened his badge, which had been knocked askew during the fight. "But with some additional evidence I don't think Judge Harrow was expecting." They made their way up the courthouse steps, the crowd parting before them like water. Jonah stayed close to Anna, supporting her with one arm while his other hand remained near his holster. He didn't trust Markson's influence, even now. Inside, the courthouse was packed to capacity. Every bench was filled, with additional spectators standing against the walls and crowded in the back. Judge Harrow sat behind his imposing desk on the raised platform, his thin face frozen in outraged disbelief as he watched their battered procession enter. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, banging his gavel as murmurs swept through the courtroom. "Sheriff Dunn, explain yourself immediately." "Your Honor," Dunn replied with calm authority, "I'm presenting key witnesses in the custody case of infant Hope Monroe Rye, also arresting Emmett Markson on multiple felony charges, including attempted murder and kidnapping." The judge's face reddened. "This is highly irregular. Mr. Markson is a respected citizen, not some common criminal." "With respect, Your Honor," Dunn continued, unperturbed, "I have evidence and eyewitness testimony regarding Mr. Markson's attempts to silence these witnesses through violence. Evidence that will be of great interest to the territorial authorities." He nodded toward a well-dressed man in the front row, presumably the newspaper reporter from Denver. The calculation was clear on Harrow's face. Whatever his loyalty to Markson, he wouldn't risk his own position if the wind was shifting. "This court will hear the evidence," he said stiffly. "But I warn you, Sheriff, these are serious allegations." "Yes, sir, they are." Dunn motioned for Markson to be seated at the defendant's table, where his lawyer, a sleek, expensive-looking man from Denver, was already rising in protest. "Your Honor, my client is injured and clearly in no condition to proceed with this hearing. I move for an immediate postponement." Denied, Harrow replied, surprising everyone. The welfare of a child is at stake. We will proceed. His gaze shifted to Anna, still holding Hope protectively. Mrs. Monroe, or Mrs. Rye, as you now apparently claim to be, approached the bench. Anna hesitated, looking to Jonah for reassurance. He nodded slightly, and she moved forward, her head held high despite her obvious exhaustion. Your Honor, she began, her voice soft but clear. I am Anna Monroe Rye, lawfully married to Jonah Rye, and mother to infant Hope Rye. She held out the marriage certificate that Samuel had filed. Our union was performed legally and witnessed according to territorial law. Harrow examined the document with obvious reluctance. This appears to be in order, though the timing raises questions about its purpose. The purpose was to protect my daughter from the man who tried to kill us both, Anna replied with sudden fire. Emmett Markson shot me and left me and my newborn daughter to die in a blizzard. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Markson's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection! These are slanderous accusations without a shred of evidence. I have evidence, Jonah spoke up, stepping forward. I was there. I witnessed Markson shoot Anna and abandon her and the infant in that cabin during the worst storm of the winter. The testimony of a bounty hunter of questionable reputation, the lawyer scoffed. Hardly reliable. What about my testimony? Sheriff Dunn moved to stand beside Jonah. I found the bullet Markson fired, had it matched to his revolver by a gunsmith in Cheyenne. He produced a small lead slug in an evidence envelope. And I have statements from 3 other witnesses regarding Mr. Markson's pattern of violence against women who become inconvenient to him. The momentum in the courtroom was shifting palpably. Judge Harrow, sensing which way the wind was blowing, adjusted his approach. These are serious criminal matters that must be addressed separately from the custody issue before us today. They're directly relevant to the custody petition, Dunn insisted. A man who attempts to murder the mother of his child is hardly fit for parental rights. The judge glared at him, but didn't contradict the statement. Mrs. Rye, do you acknowledge that Emmett Markson is the biological father of your child? Anna's grip on Hope tightened slightly. Yes, Your Honor. But he forfeited any right to her when he tried to kill us both. And you entered into this marriage with Mr. Rye willingly, without coercion? Yes, Your Honor. Jonah saved our lives and has protected us at great personal risk. Anna's gaze found Jonah's across the courtroom. I could not ask for a better father for my daughter. The judge turned his attention to Jonah. Mr. Rye, you were until very recently a bounty hunter with no fixed address or regular employment. How do you propose to support a wife and child? It was a fair question, one Jonah had been too busy surviving to consider fully. But looking at Anna and Hope now, the answer came with surprising clarity. Sheriff Dunn has offered me a position as deputy, he said, and I've accepted. Redemption will be our home now. This announcement caused another stir in the courtroom. Dunn hadn't actually made the offer formally, but his slight nod confirmed he supported the statement. I see. Judge Harrow steepled his fingers, visibly reassessing the political landscape before him. With Markson's influence clearly waning and public sentiment shifting, his path forward was narrowing. And what of Mr. Markson's petition for custody? In light of the criminal charges against my client, Markson's lawyer interjected smoothly, we withdraw the petition at this time, without prejudice to refile at a later date should circumstances change. It was as close to a concession as they would get. Markson himself sat in stony silence, his eyes burning with barely contained fury as he watched his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. Judge Harrow cleared his throat. Given the withdrawal of the petition and the evidence of a legal marriage, this court recognizes Jonah and Anna Rye as the lawful parents and guardians of infant Hope Rye. Case dismissed. The bang of his gavel was nearly drowned out by the eruption of voices in the courtroom. Some cheered, others muttered in disapproval, but the overwhelming sense was one of a community witnessing a seismic shift in its power structure. As deputies led a still silent Markson away to the jail, Jonah made his way to Anna's side. Hope had awakened amid the commotion, her tiny face scrunched in confusion at the noise. It's over, Anna said softly, wonder in her voice. We won. Jonah shook his head slightly. Not over. Not yet. His gaze followed Markson's retreating form. Men like that don't stay down unless you bury them for good. Then we'll bury him, she replied with surprising steel. With the truth, all of it. Clara Reed pushed through the crowd to join them, her face alight with vindicated satisfaction. The reporter wants statements from both of you, she said. Every detail about Markson, from the beginning. There's time for that later, Samuel interjected, noticing how Anna swayed slightly on her feet. These folks need rest and medical attention first. Dunn rejoined them, having given instructions regarding Markson's incarceration. Samuel's right. Dr. Felder's waiting at his office. You all need patching up before anything else. As they made their way out of the courthouse, the crowd pressed close, some offering congratulations, others simply curious to see the people who had dared to challenge Emmett Markson, and apparently won. One woman pushed forward, pressing something into Anna's hand. For the baby, she whispered, then disappeared back into the crowd before Anna could thank her. It was a tiny silver bracelet, clearly handmade, with Hope's name engraved on a delicate plate. Seems you've got more friends than you realize, Jonah observed. We, Anna corrected gently, more friends than we realized. The word we hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to fully address. Their marriage had been one of convenience and necessity, yet something undeniable had formed between them through shared danger and purpose. One day at a time, Jonah said, as if reading her thoughts. Let's just get through today first. Anna nodded, gratitude and something more complex softening her expression. One day at a time. As they stepped into the bright midday sun, Hope stirred again, blinking up at the sky with solemn gray eyes. For the first time since Jonah had found her in that snow-covered cabin, the infant seemed truly at peace, secure in the knowledge, however instinctive, that she was finally safe. But even as they walked toward Dr. Felder's office, Jonah couldn't shake the sense that their victory was incomplete. Markson was down but not defeated. The legal battle might be temporarily won, but the larger war was far from over. And somewhere in the shadows, watching the unfolding drama with calculating eyes, lurked threats they had yet to discover. Threats that would test their newfound family in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. Dr. Felder's office hummed with quiet activity as he tended to the various injuries sustained during the confrontation at the cabin. Anna's gunshot wound had partially reopened during the escape, requiring fresh stitches and bandages. Jonah suffered 3 cracked ribs, a collection of cuts and bruises, and a gash along his temple that would leave yet another scar to add to his collection. Hope, miraculously, had emerged physically unscathed, though Felder noted she seemed more fretful than before, sensitive to sudden movements and loud noises in a way that suggested even infants could carry the imprints of trauma. She'll recover quickly, the doctor assured Anna, who watched anxiously as he completed his examination of the baby. Children are remarkably resilient, especially at this age. And Anna? Jonah asked quietly from his position by the window, where he'd been keeping watch on the street below. Old habits died hard, and despite Markson's imprisonment, he couldn't shake the vigilance that had kept them all alive. Felder's expression grew more serious. She needs rest, proper rest, not running through burning cabins or riding 15 miles with a reopened wound. He turned to Anna with the stern authority that doctors reserve for stubborn patients. A week of bed rest, minimum. No exceptions. Anna looked ready to protest, but something in Jonah's expression stopped her. A week, she agreed reluctantly. But not here, I want to go home. She hesitated over the word, as if testing its unfamiliar weight. Home. The concept struck Jonah with unexpected force. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a place that qualified for that designation. Perhaps the small Ohio farm before the war, before Sarah and their unborn child had been claimed by cholera. Since then, home had been a succession of army tents, trail camps, and rented rooms, each as temporary as his purpose in them. Clara's offered her spare room again, he said, pushing away the unwelcome surge of memory, until we can find something more permanent. Actually, Samuel spoke up from his position by the door, I may have a better option. The old Whitman place on the south edge of town has been sitting empty since Jacob passed last winter. It's small but solid, 2 rooms, good well, patch of land for a garden. His sister in Denver owns it now. I spoke with her by telegraph this morning. Jonah raised an eyebrow. You arranged a house for us without knowing if we'd even survive the day. Samuel's deep laugh filled the small examination room. I had faith in your determination, Mr. Rye, and in God's plan for that little one there. He nodded toward Hope. Mrs. Whitman says you can rent it for a reasonable sum with option to buy once you are established. The offer was unexpected and touched something deep in Jonah that he'd thought long buried, a yearning for permanence, for roots. But caution tempered his response. Markson still has influence, even from a jail cell, he reminded them. Anyone who helps us could face retaliation. Let him try, Clara said firmly, entering the room with a basket of fresh supplies. This town has lived under his shadow for too long. People are finding their courage again. She set the basket beside Anna's bed. Besides, the telegraph office has been busy all day. News of Markson's arrest is spreading across the territory. Sheriff Dunn arrived as they were discussing arrangements for moving to the Whitman place. His weathered face carried the strain of the day's events, but there was satisfaction in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Markson's lawyer is already pushing for bail, he reported without preamble. Judge Harrow denied it for now, but we can expect more legal maneuvering in the coming days. What charges is he facing? Jonah asked. Attempted murder, kidnapping, assault, obstruction of justice, for starters. Dunn removed his hat, running a hand through his gray-streaked hair. I've also wired the territorial marshal about reopening the investigation into Little Wolf's camp. With your testimony and Two Wolves' statement, we might finally get justice for those people. Anna shifted Hope to her shoulder, patting the infant's back with practiced tenderness despite her own discomfort. What about his businesses? His ranch? That's the complicated part, Dunn admitted. Markson's operation employs half the county. Can't just shut it down without causing hardship to a lot of innocent people. Not to mention his partners back east, Samuel added. Men with political connections who won't take kindly to their investment being threatened. The reality of their situation settled over the room. They might have won the initial battle, but the war was far from over. Markson's reach extended beyond redemption, beyond Wyoming territory. Powerful interests would resist any attempt to dismantle his empire. One problem at a time, Jonah said finally. First priority is keeping Anna and Hope safe while they recover. He turned to Dunn. How secure is the jail? Can Markson be trusted not to have help from the inside? I've got my two most reliable deputies on rotating shifts, Dunn replied, but I won't pretend it's impenetrable. That's why I've asked the territorial marshal to send additional men. Should be here within a week. A week is a long time with someone like Markson, Jonah observed, which is why you'll need this. Dunn reached into his coat and withdrew a silver deputy's badge. I meant what I said in court. Redemption could use a man like you on the right side of the law for a change. Jonah stared at the badge, conflicting emotions warring within him. He'd spent years as a manhunter, operating in the gray areas between lawlessness and justice. The idea of representing the law officially was both foreign and strangely appealing. I'm not sure I'm cut out for a badge, he said honestly. You stood against Markson when no one else would, Dunn replied. You protected that woman and child at risk to your own life. Seems to me that's exactly what the badge is supposed to represent. Anna was watching him, her expression carefully neutral, though something in her eyes suggested the decision mattered to her more than she was willing to admit. Jonah reached out slowly and took the badge, its weight solid and significant in his palm. Temporary, Turo, he said, until Markson's situation is resolved one way or another. Dunn's smile suggested he knew better. Of course, temporary. The move to the Whitman place happened that evening, with Samuel and several volunteers from town helping transport Anna, Hope, and what few possessions they had acquired. The house was indeed small but sound, a simple two-room structure with a stone fireplace, solid wooden floors, and windows that actually closed properly. After the cabins, jail cells, and temporary shelters of recent days, it felt like a palace. Clara and several other women from town had prepared the place, bringing furniture, linens, cooking implements, and enough food to last a week. The gesture left Anna speechless with gratitude, while Jonah found himself uncomfortable with the unaccustomed generosity, a man used to paying his own way now accepting help from virtual strangers. You'll have to get used to it, Clara told him as they arranged Anna's bed near the warmth of the fireplace. This is how community works. Today we help you. Tomorrow you help someone else. That's how we all survive out here. As night fell, Jonah made a final patrol around the property, checking sight lines and defensible positions out of ingrained habit. The house sat on a gentle rise, providing good visibility in all directions. A small barn and corral stood nearby, currently empty but ready for whatever livestock they might eventually acquire. Acquire. The word stopped him in his tracks. He was thinking like a man planning to stay, to build something lasting. It was a dangerous mindset for someone who had spent years deliberately avoiding attachments. When he returned inside, he found Anna seated in a rocking chair by the fire, Hope sleeping peacefully in a cradle that one of the townswomen had delivered, a family heirloom offered for as long as you need it. "She's finally settled," Anna said softly, her face illuminated by the dancing firelight. The warm glow softened her features, making her look younger than her 19 years, closer to the girl she might have been before Markson's cruelty had forced her to grow up too quickly. Jonah pulled a chair beside her, wincing as his battered ribs protested the movement. "You should be resting too," he reminded her. "I will. Soon." She studied him with thoughtful eyes. "You took the badge." "Temporarily." "Still." A small smile touched her lips. "Deputy Rye has a certain ring to it." Yeah, Jonah found himself returning the smile despite the gravity of their situation. "Better than that bounty hunter, I suppose." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the fire and listening to Hope's soft breathing from the cradle. The domesticity of the scene was surreal after the violence and chaos of recent days. "We should talk about this," Anna said finally, gesturing vaguely between them. "About us, this marriage." Jonah had been expecting this conversation but wasn't entirely prepared for it. "What about it?" "It served its purpose," she said carefully. "Hope is legally protected. Markson's custody claim has been denied. When things settle down, if you want to—" She hesitated. "I would understand if you wanted to dissolve the arrangement." The offer was considerate, even generous, releasing him from an obligation undertaken in desperation. Yet Jonah found himself strangely reluctant to accept the easy escape she was offering. "Is that what you want?" he asked instead of answering directly. Anna looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "I don't know what I want anymore. A week ago, I was dying in a cabin in the snow. Now I'm a married woman with a home and a community that seems determined to support us." She glanced toward the cradle. "What I want doesn't matter as much as what's best for her." "And what's best for her?" Jonah pressed gently. "Stability, safety." Anna met his gaze directly. "A father who will teach her to be strong and kind in a world that often isn't." The implication was clear and unexpectedly affecting. This woman he barely knew was offering him something he had never thought to have again. A family, a purpose beyond the next bounty or the next fight. "I'm not sure I know how to be those things," he admitted. "A husband, a father." "Neither do I," Anna replied with simple honesty. "Know how to be a wife and mother, I mean. But I'm learning." Her hand moved unconsciously to the bandaged wound at her side. "Markson took so much from me, my reputation, my security, nearly my life. But he gave me hope. And in a strange way, he gave me you too." Jonah considered her words, feeling the weight of the decision before them. This wasn't just about legal protection anymore. It was about choice. The first real choice Anna had been given in far too long. "Let's not decide anything tonight," he suggested. "We've both been through hell. Let's give ourselves time to heal, to think clearly." He reached across the space between them, his calloused hand covering her smaller one. "No rush." Relief softened her features. "No rush," she agreed. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Jonah was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his holster before he consciously processed the movement. "Easy," Samuel's deep voice rumbled from outside. "Just bringing news." Jonah opened the door to find the blacksmith standing in the darkness, his expression grave. "What's happened?" "Ryder just came in from the railroad junction," Samuel reported. "Telegram from Denver for Judge Harrow. Markson's business partners have hired a team of lawyers. They're on their way here to resolve the situation." "What kind of resolution do they have in mind?" Anna asked from her position by the fire. "The kind that involves money first, threats second, and whatever it takes to protect their investment." Samuel replied grimly. These are powerful men, Mrs. Rye. Men who don't care about justice or right, only profit. Jonah absorbed this new threat with grim resignation. When will they arrive? Train reaches the junction tomorrow afternoon. They'll be in Redemption by evening. Then we have until tomorrow to prepare. Jonah's mind was already working through implications and countermeasures. Does Dunn know? Samuel nodded. He's calling a town meeting at first light, wants everyone to understand what's coming. After Samuel had gone, Jonah secured the door and checked the windows once more. The night beyond was quiet, stars scattered across the Wyoming sky like silver dust. In another life, it might have been beautiful. Tonight, it just felt exposed. It never ends, does it? Anna said quietly, watching him check his weapons for what must have been the 10th time that evening. Even with Markson in jail, we're still fighting. Men like Markson don't fight alone, Jonah replied. They have allies, resources, especially when there's money involved. And what do we have? Jonah paused, considering the question seriously. The truth, each other, and apparently more friends than I would have expected. Anna nodded, gathering a blanket around her shoulders as she rose carefully from the rocking chair. It will have to be enough. She moved slowly toward the small bedroom, pausing at the doorway. Jonah, thank you for everything. After she had gone, Jonah settled into a chair positioned to watch both the door and the windows. Sleep would be a luxury he couldn't afford tonight. Too many variables, too many unknowns. Hope stirred in her cradle, making small sounds of distress. Jonah moved to check on her, awkwardly adjusting the blanket that had come loose. Her tiny hand found his finger, gripping it with surprising strength. I'm here, little one, he whispered, not going anywhere. As he kept his vigil through the long night, Jonah found himself contemplating a future he had never imagined possible. Not just the immediate challenge of Markson and his powerful allies, but beyond that, a life in one place with responsibilities and connections that couldn't be abandoned when things got complicated. It was terrifying. And yet, watching Hope sleep peacefully in her cradle, trusting in his protection, he couldn't imagine walking away. Dawn broke clear and cold over Redemption, painting the small frontier town in shades of gold and amber. Jonah, who had dozed only fitfully through the night, was already awake when the first knock came at the door. Clara stood on the porch, a basket of fresh bread and provisions in her arms. Thought you might need breakfast, she said, taking in his exhausted appearance with a knowing eye. You look like you could use about a week of sleep. Sleep's overrated, Jonah replied, accepting the basket gratefully. Any word from town? Meeting set for 9 o'clock at the church. Everyone's talking about it. She lowered her voice. Some of Markson's men were drinking at the Red Dog Saloon last night, making threats. Said their boss would be out by sundown, one way or another. Idle talk or genuine plan? Hard to say. Sheriffs doubled the guard at the jail, just in case. Jonah nodded, making mental calculations. I'll be at the meeting. Anna and Hope will stay here with me, Clara finished firmly. No arguments. You need to be able to focus, not worry about them every second. He couldn't disagree with her logic, though the idea of leaving Anna and Hope, even in capable hands, set his teeth on edge. Anna emerged from the bedroom as they were speaking, Hope cradled in one arm, while the other hand supported her injured side. Despite her obvious discomfort, there was a determination in her bearing that spoke of a woman finding her strength after nearly losing everything. I heard, she said. Clara's right. We'll be fine here. You need to be at that meeting. The town meeting drew nearly every resident of Redemption, packing the small church beyond capacity. Some stood along the walls, others spilled out onto the steps, straining to hear as Sheriff Dunn addressed the gathered crowd. Jonah positioned himself near the back, his newly acquired deputy's badge pinned to his vest, the Spencer rifle never far from his hand. From this vantage point, he could observe the entire assembly, noting who seemed supportive, who appeared hostile, and who was watching with calculating neutrality. By now you've all heard about Emmett Markson's arrest and the charges against him, Dunn began without preamble. What you may not know is that his business partners from Denver are sending representatives to resolve the situation. They arrived this evening. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Markson's Eastern investors were known by reputation, but rarely seen in Redemption. What do they want? Someone called out, Demison. To protect their investment, Dunn replied bluntly. Markson's enterprises, the ranch, The contracts with the railroad, the land holdings, represent significant capital. They won't allow those assets to be jeopardized by criminal charges, no matter how justified. So they'll buy off the judge, a woman's voice stated flatly, just like Markson always did. Maybe, Dunn acknowledged. But Judge Harrow is in a difficult position now. This case has attracted attention beyond our little corner of the territory. The Denver Post has a reporter in town. The territorial governor's office has telegraphed inquiries. What does that mean for us? Asked the owner of the general store, a heavy-set man who had always maintained careful neutrality in town politics. It means redemption is facing a choice, Dunn said, his voice carrying to the furthest corners of the church. We can allow Markson's partners to sweep everything under the rug, the attempted murders, the corruption, even the massacre at Little Wolf's camp. Or we can stand together and demand justice, no matter the cost. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of decision. These were not abstract principles, but real consequences that would affect every person in the room. What kind of cost are we talking about, Sheriff? Someone finally asked. Dunn didn't sugarcoat his response. Economic pressure, certainly. The railroad might reconsider its junction here. Cattle buyers might boycott local ranchers. Credit at the territorial bank could suddenly become scarce. More murmurs, these tinged with fear. In a frontier economy where margins were already thin, such pressures could mean the difference between survival and ruin. And if Markson goes free, a voice called from the back, what happens to the woman and child he tried to kill? What happens to Rye? All eyes turned to Jonah, who met their gaze steadily. We'll manage, he said simply. We always have. No, Samuel's deep voice rumbled from his position near the altar. That's not how this works anymore. He stood, his powerful frame commanding attention. That woman and child are part of our community now, and Rye is wearing a deputy's badge. If we abandon them to Markson's vengeance, we abandon everything that makes us civilized. Easy for you to say, retorted Harris, the corrupt deputy who had sided with Markson. Your smithy doesn't depend on ranch business. My smithy depends on my ability to face myself in the mirror each morning, Samuel replied with quiet dignity. Something you might want to consider, Harris. Before the exchange could escalate, the church doors opened, admitting Judge Harrow. The magistrate looked uncomfortable, out of place in the emotionally charged atmosphere. Sheriff, he acknowledged Dunn with a curt nod, I've received further communication from Denver. The territorial governor is sending a special prosecutor to review the charges against Mr. Markson. Until then, I am ordered to maintain the status quo. Markson remains in custody, but all proceedings are suspended. That could be weeks, Dunn protested. Indeed. Harrow's thin face betrayed nothing. The governor also expresses concern about local tensions, potentially leading to extra-legal actions. He reminds everyone that frontier justice is not an acceptable substitute for due process. The message was clear: no lynch mobs, no vigilante action. Everything would proceed through proper legal channels, no matter how corrupt those channels might be. As the meeting dispersed, Jonah found himself approached by a slender man with ink-stained fingers and a shrewd expression. The Denver Post reporter. Deputy Rye, the man greeted him, offering a hand. Michael Callahan, Denver Post. I'd like to hear your side of this remarkable story. Jonah hesitated. Publicity had never been his ally in the bounty hunting business, and old habits died hard. Yet he recognized the potential value of having the truth documented by a reputable newspaper. Not much to tell beyond what you have already heard, he said cautiously. I disagree, Callahan replied with a journalist's persistence. A renowned manhunter becomes a family man overnight, stands against the most powerful man in the county, and exposes corruption that may extend all the way to the territorial capital. That's quite a story. I'm just trying to keep a promise I made. The best stories often start that way. Callahan produced a small notebook from his coat. Would you and Mrs. Rye be willing to provide a formal statement? With your permission, I'd like to interview you both, get the full account. Jonah considered the request. Having their testimony in print would make it harder for Markson's allies to simply make the case disappear. It might also provide some protection. Harder to make people vanish when their story was already public knowledge. I'll speak with Anna, he said finally. If she's willing, you can come by the house this afternoon, but Hope stays out of it. No descriptions, no details about the baby. Understood, Callahan agreed readily. My interest is in Markson's crimes and the system that protected him, not in exploiting a child. As the reporter moved away to speak with other townspeople, Dunn appeared at Jonah's side. Press can be a double-edged sword, the sheriff cautioned. Once that story hits print, there's no controlling where it goes or who reads it. Might be exactly what we need, Jonah replied. Make it too public for Markson's partners to simply buy their way out. Maybe. Dunn didn't sound convinced. Just remember, men with money and power hate nothing more than public embarrassment. Push them into a corner, and they'll come back harder than you can imagine. The warning stayed with Jonah as he made his way back to the Whitman place where Clara had remained with Anna and Hope. The morning's clear skies had given way to gathering clouds, promising more snow by evening. The weather matched his mood, uncertain, potentially threatening. He found Anna seated at the small table by the window, writing in what appeared to be a journal while Clara prepared a midday meal. Hope slept in her cradle nearby, undisturbed by the quiet domestic activity around her. How did it go? Anna asked, setting aside her writing. Jonah summarized the meeting as Clara served a simple meal of bread, cheese, and venison stew. Both women listened intently, their expressions growing more concerned as he described the pending arrival of Markson's business partners and the special prosecutor. So we're in limbo, Anna concluded, waiting for people from Denver to decide our fate. Unless we take a more active approach, Jonah said. He explained about the reporter's request for an interview. Getting the story in print might create enough pressure to ensure a fair process. Anna considered this, absently running her fingers over the journal beside her. I've been writing it all down anyway, she said. Everything Markson did, everything that happened. I thought, if something happens to me, Hope should know the truth someday. The simple statement hit Jonah like a physical blow. This young woman preparing for her own potential death, making sure her daughter would have answers to questions she might never be able to ask her mother directly. Nothing's going to happen to you, he said with more certainty than he felt. Anna smiled sadly. You can't promise that. None of us can. She touched the journal again. But yes, I'll speak with the reporter. The truth should be told, no matter what comes next. Clara, who had been listening silently, nodded her approval. Good. Secrets are what gave Markson his power all these years. Light and truth are the best disinfectants. The interview with Callahan lasted nearly 2 hours. The reporter was thorough but respectful, particularly sensitive to Anna's still recovering condition. He took meticulous notes as they recounted the entire saga, from Anna's employment at Markson's ranch to the shooting, from Jonah's discovery of mother and child in the blizzard to the final confrontation at the cabin and the courthouse hearing. When they finished, Callahan closed his notebook with a thoughtful expression. This goes beyond a local dispute or even an attempted murder case, he said. If what you've told me about Little Wolf's camp can be verified, if 2 wolves will provide testimony about what happened there, we're talking about crimes that could interest federal authorities, not just the territorial court. Will your newspaper print all of it? Jonah asked. Even the parts that implicate powerful interests? The Post isn't afraid of controversy, Callahan assured them. My editor has been looking for a story that exposes the darker side of territorial development. The public back east has a romantic notion of frontier life. They need to understand the human cost of all this progress. After the reporter had gone, promising that his initial article would appear within days, Jonah found himself restless, uneasy. The storm he had sensed brewing that morning was now visible on the horizon, dark clouds gathering over the mountains to the west, moving steadily toward redemption. Something's coming, he said, more to himself than to Anna, who was resting in the rocking chair by the fire. The snow, she asked, following his gaze out the window. That too. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You think Markson's people will try something tonight? It wasn't a question, but Jonah nodded anyway. The representatives from Denver arrive on the evening train. Perfect distraction. Perfect opportunity. For what? Breaking him out of jail? That, or silencing witnesses. He didn't need to specify which witnesses. Anna's hand moved protectively toward Hope's cradle. What do we do? Before Jonah could answer, urgent pounding at the door announced a visitor. Samuel stood on the porch, his expression grim beneath a hat already dusted with the first flakes of the approaching storm. Sheriff sent me, he said without preamble. Ryder just came in from the junction. Train arrived early. Denver men are already on their way to town, along with a dozen hired guns. How long? An hour, maybe less. Samuel glanced at the darkening sky. Storms pushing them to hurry. Jonah made his decision instantly. We need to move Anna and Hope somewhere safer. This house is too exposed, too obvious. My place, Samuel offered immediately. Cellars secure, entrance hidden. They'd have to tear down the whole smithy to find it in. Perfect. Jonah turned to Anna. Pack only what you absolutely need. We leave in 10 minutes. As Anna hurried to gather essentials, Jonah pulled Samuel aside. What about Markson himself? Is the jail secure? Dunn's got 5 men guarding it, all armed. But if these Denver representatives have legal papers, Samuel let the implication hang in the air. They'll try to release him legally first, Jonah concluded. Save the violence for if that fails. Or use both simultaneously, legal pressure on the judge while gunmen handle the witnesses. Samuel's expression hardened. Divide our intent and our resources. The strategy was sound, exactly what Jonah would have planned in their position. Attack from multiple angles, create confusion, achieve the primary objective while defenders scrambled to respond. I need to warn Dunn, he said. Can you get Anna and Hope safely to the smithy? Samuel nodded. My wagon's outside. We'll take the back roads. Stay out of sight. 10 minutes later, Anna and Hope were bundled into Samuel's wagon, hidden beneath blankets and supplies that made them appear to be nothing more than a routine delivery. Clara insisted on accompanying them, providing both additional protection and a feminine presence that might allay suspicions if they were stopped. Be careful, Anna told Jonah as they prepared to depart. The simple phrase carried the weight of unspoken emotion, of growing attachment neither of them had anticipated when this journey began. Always am, he replied, his hand briefly touching hers where it held Hope's blanket secure. I'll join you as soon as I can. The snow was falling steadily now, thick flakes swirling in the strengthening wind. Good weather for concealment, but also for surprise attacks. Visibility would be limited, sounds muffled. Perfect conditions for the kind of operation Jonah suspected was already underway. As Samuel's wagon disappeared down the snow-covered lane, Jonah mounted the horse Dunn had provided, a sturdy black gelding with the steady temperament needed for law work. The deputy's badge felt strange against his chest, a weight that represented responsibility beyond his own survival. For perhaps the first time since the war, redemption awaited, its buildings already blurring into gray shapes through the thickening snowfall. Somewhere in that gathering storm, men were coming with money, legal papers, and guns, all intended to undo everything Jonah and Anna had fought so desperately to achieve. Justice for Hope, safety for Anna, accountability for Markson. Jonah urged the horse forward, the Spencer rifle secure in its scabbard, the Colt Navy revolver at his hip. He had never sought this fight, never wanted to be a symbol of resistance against corruption and power. Yet here he was, riding directly into the heart of a storm, both literal and figurative, prepared to stand his ground not just for himself, but for a woman and child who had somehow become the center of his world in the span of a few chaotic days. As he approached the edge of town, a solitary figure on horseback materialized through the swirling snow. 2 wolves mounted on a paint pony, his impassive face partially hidden by a blanket wrapped against the cold. Many men come, the Cheyenne warrior said without greeting, from the Iron Road. Guns under coats, mean eyes. How many? 15, maybe more. 2 in black coats give orders. Others follow. 2 wolves' dark eyes held Jonah's. They ask in town about you, about woman and child. The confirmation of his fears sent ice through Jonah's veins that had nothing to do with the gathering blizzard. The jail? Markson? 4 men watched jail, not close, waiting. 2 wolves adjusted the knife at his belt. Yellow hair still inside, for now. Jonah considered the tactical situation. Markson's allies were positioning themselves, gathering intelligence before making their move. The approaching storm would provide cover for whatever they planned. Jailbreak, witness elimination, or both simultaneously. Anna and Hope are at Samuel's smithy, he told 2 wolves. Hidden in the cellar. Can you watch over them? Make sure no one discovers them? The warrior nodded once. I will guard. No harm comes while I live. He turned his pony, then paused. What will you do, Scout? The question was simple but profound. What indeed? Jonah was one man against a small army of hired guns backed by wealthy interests. The legal system that should provide protection was compromised at best. Even Sheriff Dunn, for all his integrity, was constrained by jurisdiction and procedure. Yet surrender wasn't an option. Not with Anna and Hope's lives at stake. Not with Markson's crimes still unpunished. What I've always done, Jonah replied finally. Hunt the dangerous ones. Two Wolves studied him for a moment longer, then nodded with something like approval. Good hunting, Scout. May your aim be true. With that, he disappeared into the swirling snow as silently as he had appeared. Jonah continued toward town, his resolve hardening with every hoofbeat. He was no longer just a bounty hunter tracking criminals for money. He was a man defending his family, his community, his own chance at redemption. The storm intensified around him, but within, a different kind of weather was brewing. Cold, focused fury that would not be deterred by threats or odds or the gathering darkness. Let them come with their money and their guns and their corrupt papers. Let them think their power made them untouchable. They would learn what Markson had learned, that some things couldn't be bought or intimidated or eliminated. Some principles stood firm against even the fiercest storms. Justice, truth, family, things worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. But first, worth living for. Redemption awaited, in every sense of the word.